Yeah.
East Hampton Town Board, we are live, being streamed and being recorded. Thank you very much.
Thank you, LTV, and good morning and welcome everyone to the September 17th, 2024 work session. Carol, if you could please read the roll call.
Present. Good morning. Present.
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 Present. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So today we have 5 topics that we're going to be discussing. Jeannie Carrozza will be bringing bids to us. Then we've got the Old Stone Highway Bridge repair, culvert replacement, invasive species removal, and habitat restoration with Jim Peterman from LKMA and Melissa McCarran. Congratulations, Melissa.
You threw me off.
You used to be Melissa Winslow, but got married, and now we've got Melissa McCarran. Next, we've followed by proposed amendments to Chapter 213 Shellfish, and that's with David Lease and Nick Cortesitas, followed by affordable housing developments, proposed density and code corrections with Eric Shantz, our housing director, and Eric has a second topic, proposed employee housing development, formerly employer-sponsored housing. We did have National Cleanup Day from the Litter Action Committee as a topic, but I can't blame them. They're not going to wait until the end. They're going to speak during public portion. And then we follow that by liaison reports and resolutions. So let's start with public portion. Carol, you have a sign-up list for us? Here they come. Beautiful. Okay. So Sarah Davison and Jane Meering, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Sarah Davison from the Litter Action Committee, a town-appointed committee. I want to thank the town board for passing a resolution announcing that East Hampton Town is participating in the National Cleanup Day campaign. We're here today to remind you and the public to join us in cleaning up roadside trash in East Hampton on this Saturday, September 21st. That's this Saturday, September 21st. National Cleanup Day is the largest single-day cleanup day in the United States. Last year, 2 million people participated. And now I'd like to call on my colleague Jane Meering to give you the specifics about the East Hampton activities.
Sarah, good morning, board. Yes, I just want to, so the East Hampton Litter Action Committee ourselves, we are hosting four pickups across 4 of the 5 of our hamlets. And I just want to read out quickly where they are and where they're starting. So on the 21st, on Saturday, there'll be one in Montauk, starting at the Concerned Citizens of Montauk office, 6 South Elmwood. In the Springs, we'll be gathering at Oshwag Hall. In East Hampton, we'll be kicking off at the Senior Center on Springs Fireplace Road, and in Wainscott, beginning at Route 27, Georgia Pond rest stops. These cleanups start at 10 a.m. and roughly about noon, and except for the East Hampton one, which will start at 9 a.m. for the early birds. And you'll note there's not one scheduled in Amagansett, but hopefully my fellow residents in Amagansett will participate in those. Do I have time to just, one thing also, we do want to do a shout out to all the lovely people who are part of the Adopt a Road program, as well as the Adopt a Highway, which is basically Route 27. We'd love it if all of you can come out and clean up your adopted sponsored stretch of road. And also any citizens use National Cleanup Day as perhaps an incentive, an impetus to adopt something in the town. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane.
So in closing, roadside trash is not only a blight, but it threatens our wildlife and our nearshore waters. We will be entering all the East Hampton data into the national database. So let's have a great turnout and pick up a lot of trash. I want to also thank Bistrian Materials and Mickey's Carting for helping with the event. Thank you so much.
And as we like to say, don't trash East Hampton.
Thank you, ladies. Okay, now I'll ask for a show of hands if anyone would like to address the board. David? Welcome, David.
Thank you. Welcome, Town Board. My public comment today is actually a follow-up to an email that I sent on September 9th. Apparently, some of my emails are winding up in your spam folder, so I hope we can eliminate that problem. But you did receive, some of you at least, received that email. It concerned a matter that was on your work session agenda last Tuesday at a meeting that I could not attend or even watch until afterwards. Councilmember Flight definitely received my email because he was able to make some comments with regard to the action that was taken, specifically the action to accept what was described as a generous donation of 6 parcels of land from a gentleman named Frank Gunaris. And the resolution that I read was spectacularally uninformative as to the circumstances surrounding this most generous action that you were accepting, except that it made note of the fact that the Land Acquisition Department was the sponsor, and the specific tracts were identified by Suffolk County tax map number, and that you were going to spend up to $3,500 to record those, the deed from the generous benefactor. Well, what I had found out, first of all, let me say that I have filed a FOIL request requesting a copy of the donation agreement, and frankly, it is your obligation under the open meetings law to make available to the public all contracts, agreements, and other relevant documents that underlie or explain an action that you are contemplating taking as a government. You might need a software update. I know that school boards do this on a regular basis. Appended to the agenda, if they are to adopt an accounting measure or grant a contract, that contract is part of the agenda. In your case, up to this point in time, it's up to citizens that are interested in matters that you are acting upon that are not obvious on the face of the resolution must file FOIL requests, or not really just freedom of information law, but rather open meeting law requests, because those documents should have been made part of the public record at the time that the agenda was posted. Anyway, I've been doing a lot of research. I'm not quite complete, but with the great assistance of the town clerk, I've been able to pick through the planning board minutes and the town board minutes, and I'm creating a fairly good picture of what happened. It's not what you might think from the face of the resolution that you adopted unanimously last week. Since 1981, this town has had a forward-thinking program of preserving open space and enabled developers to choose the option, or actually required developers to create open space subdivisions. And in the process, a substantial amount of land, depending on the circumstances of where the land is located, needed to be reserved as open space. And one of 3 things could happen to that reserved open space when the subdivision was filed. Either A, it was granted to the town and the town would have the opportunity to manage it. B, it could be granted to a recognized land preservation society, such organizations such as a Peconic Land Trust or Nature Conservancy, and they would have the obligation and the opportunity to preserve it and protect it in the future for the benefit of all residents. Or 3, in the circumstances that some developers choose, a homeowners association, which is usually done in large, massive developments, is created and as a separate entity, and that entity can then own the reserve areas. What happened in this instance was something that should never have happened. Based on my communications with Scott Wilson, the land management director, it's something that apparently has happened way too often, maybe dozens of times in the history of East Hampton. The required conveyance of the reserve area ownership did not occur properly as a matter of land recordation. Why it got screwed up at this point, not sure. But what I did find out was, in this instance, the developer had initially planned to create a homeowners association and convey the reserved areas to the homeowners association. But soon after final approval was granted, there were further legislative changes in this town in January 1st of 1984, and it became the decision of the 4 individuals who owned the tract of land, 33 acres, creating 14 residential tracts, buildable lots. They specifically requested that instead of creating a homeowners association to take ownership of the reserved areas, they requested that they be allowed to convey it to the town. That's documented in the records of the planning board.
David, we're going to have to ask you to speed this up. We have an intense agenda today.
All right, I'll wrap it up. What I'm basically saying is the circumstances of this transaction were not made clear. The documents underlying it were not made available. And I again request a copy of the donation agreement. If this is a problem that's widespread, that reserved areas that were required to be donated to the town and preserved and protected by the town, if these things were not done, the town has a mechanism for doing it, as it did in the Beach Plum Park situation. It may require litigation, but if there was an action that was required as an essential part of creating buildable lots, and it wasn't done, and it was for the benefit of the town and the town public to create and preserve open space, the town needs to do that and not just merely label this as a generous donation from one of the 4 people who were the owners of the land and who were the developers. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here that would like to address the board? No? Jason, is there anyone on the line?
There are no callers on the line.
Okay, so we're going to move on to topics then. Jeannie, if you'd like to start us off with bids, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, just a few things here. First is the acceptance of a printing of sanitation permits and other forms. Montauk Printing and Concept Print are the apparent low bidders for that one. We're going to reject the RFP we did for employees benefit program, for the employees benefit program, and we'll revisit that down the line once, we figure out another option. And several notices. The first is a request for proposal for professional auditing and accounting services. We also have Gann Road guardrail replacement, Springs Library sanitation improvements, and lastly, the annual sidewalk contract again is going to be coming up. And that's it.
Beautiful. Questions for Jeannie?
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jeannie. Okay, so next we have the Old Stone Highway bridge repair, culvert replacement, invasive species removal, and habitat restoration, which is quite the mouthful. And I understand, Jim and Melissa, you'll be tag teaming on this. You're gonna
Yes.
start us off, Jim.
Yes. My name is James Peterman.
Pardon me for asking, are we expecting Barley Dunn to be in on this via Zoom? Because he is in the waiting room.
The next one.
Thank you very
Right.
much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is James Peterman. I'm a professional engineer. I work for the firm of Lewis K. McLean Associates. In the spring of 2022, Councilwoman Kate Rogers reached out to our firm to have us look at the Old Stone Highway culvert. She noticed it was in some need of repair and the outside walls were leaning out. We sent the proposal in. We were eventually hired by the town. We did our survey. I personally actually put some waders on and went through the culvert myself. The culvert, we could go, we look at these slides as we're going through this. Can you go to the second slide?
Can I just say, are the microphones working?
Sounds a little low.
The green light is
Sounded
on.
low when Jeannie was talking too.
The green light's
Jason,
on.
you're picking up.
I'm picking you up 100%. Yeah, I can try to amplify it another time, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's our microphone. I'm just the one at the podium is the one that I was concerned
Okay,
about.
thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I need to be closer. Okay. So the culvert, we don't have any existing plans on the culvert. I imagine that it was built up over time, once being possibly a wood structure. It appears from the things that I could see, it's a stacked stone system, gravity walls with natural stone and some cast-in-place concrete. The condition is not the greatest. It suffers from spalling. The bridge cap, the brick cap on top of the wall is basically spalling. There's cracks and spalls on the outside. And the walls, I'm assuming they're gravity walls because it's not like a precast or cast-in-place concrete. It's a stacked stone, so there's no basically steel reinforcement to hold those walls in place. So you have the forces on the inside of the walls where the roadway is, the earth pushing against the walls, which are actually making them lean out a little bit. Without having the existing structural plans and trying not to be too invasive on the existing structure, we decided to actually place some riprap on the outside to try to prevent those from leaning any further. To try to push them back in would basically, we'd probably do some more damage than good to the structure. So basically, we want to stop the leaning in its place by putting some riprap on the outside of that. The bigger problem with the culvert, if you go to the next slide, I think.
Yeah, I'm switching slides and it doesn't seem to be changing.
Oh. Well, underneath where the water actually goes back and forth underneath the roadway, there is it's called a half pipe. Basically it's a round pipe that's cut in half, and it sits on top of two concrete footings on each side of the bridge. It's 5 feet in diameter, but it's a half pipe with two concrete bases. And that was a galvanized steel, unknown age. The bottom foot of that on each side, you'd be able to see it in the picture, and when we get it up there,
What's interesting is that it looks like the picture in the picture is showing.
Yeah, give me a second. Let me.
Yeah.
I'm just go rearrange some things.
PowerPoint, but we're not getting it in here.
Give me a second. Let me see what's going on here. Sorry about that, everybody.
You
Let me
said
see
you
what's
saw it
going
on
on.
this screen?
I'm seeing everything at home. Oh, interesting. Okay, that's new.
There we are.
Okay.
We're good now, Melissa.
Oh, got it.
okay. So that's going back. We'll leave that there, but that's going back to some pictures of the top wall with the
Yeah.
top cap, the brick spalling, and a picture of the outside wall where it meets like an old stacked shale footing, which we don't intend to mess with at all. Okay, it's been lasting, I don't know how many years, but just the structure of these little help just to stand a little longer. So if you go to the next slide, we'll get to the half pipe that I was referring to.
So I think it's on the picture-in-picture.
Yeah, they're
That's-
seeing it at home.
So I'm seeing it over here, and give me a second. I'm just going to try something on my side. All right, I'm going
So
to stop
basically,
the
what
share.
you have.
Try it one more time, Melissa.
That's new.
Hold up.
So
And
I don't know what computer that is. Sorry.
it should be sharing directly from your screen. It should be fine from there.
It's
Hey.
saying it's coming from.
It says it's Kathy Burke Gonzalez has
Oh,
done
you
yeah,
know what,
they-
Melissa, you may be signed in. I had it up yesterday for an internal meeting in here. I wonder if you sign in, I don't know what.
Oh,
Julie-
there
Right,
you
there
go.
it is.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
So
Wait,
basically,
continue.
what you see on the screen right now is basically the half pipe that sits on the two concrete footings. The concrete footings are actually in very good shape. There's no undermining. There's no large cracking. But the corrugated metal half pipe that you see, the bottom foot or so, is completely lost its section modulus. You could stick your finger right through in some sections and actually hit the dirt that's on the outside. So that the plan is to, when we close the roadway, this is going to be a tough job to do if the roadway was open. So we decided to put a closure on the road, to remove the road above, remove this pipe, and slip a new aluminum plate arch culvert half pipe right on top of these existing concrete footings, and then, of course, backfill and repave the road. Do I think that could be done in less than 14 days? We put a max 14-day closure on the road. Do I think it'll take them 14 days to do it? No. But I did put some extra time in there in case he opens the road and the skies, open up for a week, or we find something that we didn't know was there that we have to take a look at. I put some safety time in there. Hopefully we don't have to use it, but the maximum time we put in there was 2 weeks. The road closure, it's I don't have a slide for that, but I know the school has some issues with our road closure. But it's basically a 1 block over. It's not like it's not going to be a detour, like a 10-minute detour. It's a very close roadway system that we're going to use. What you see on the screen now is the plan view. Looking at it from the sky, you might say, you can see the pipe going across the road, getting replaced, and the big stone riprap on the outside of the walls, on the outside of the parapets, to prevent them from moving any further. Is there another slide? I think I just had some sections.
Mine progresses, but it doesn't seem like that one's.
Huh. Well, basically what I had after these slides were actually section views. It just showed you the stone riprap, and that's the existing arch getting replaced. Of course, to get the existing arch out, you have to remove some of the concrete around the arch, put the arch in, and then replace the concrete back. And like it's shown going on those 2 existing concrete footings, like I said, they were in very good shape. The entire structure outside and what you could see from the roadway is going to be sandblasted. Spalls and cracks everywhere on the bridge are going to be, blown out, sealed, filled with concrete and a sealing medium. And it'll be epoxy coated paint, white, like it is now. And then during this design, we had to get a DEC permit. That's all approved. But the town was also working on the invasive species removal. It was decided that it would be beneficial to the town to let these projects together. Even though there's different funding streams, we categorize the bid in an A-B bid to keep the funding separate. Putting the 2 jobs together, even though one really has nothing to do with the other, saves you on the mobilization of the contractor to this site, saving the town some money. So we put the bid out. It was on July 11th. Keith Grimes, Inc. was the lowest bidder of the A and B combined. I believe he has submitted all his contractual paperwork, and it's in the town's hands now. When he gets an executed contract, which I assume will be in the next few weeks, I will be able to get a schedule out of him. I did contact his office several times requesting a schedule, but he was reluctant until he had a contract to give a schedule, since he didn't know when he was going to get the contract. So as soon as I know, well, you'll know first because he'll be submitting it to you. But I did talk to his office this morning, and I talked to, one of his staff members, and they let me know that the half pipe arch, they contacted, in the plan, we had specified who to use, what model number of that pipe. They reached out to that supplier, and they got back to her and said it's a 12-week lead time from when you order it. So finding out this morning on my drive here, I reached out to my design staff back in the office, and they're working on trying to find an equal substitute for the pipe that has a less of a lead time. So when I get answers on that, I could, certainly let you know. But we're going to try and find something equal to what we had in the bid. Because when we reached out to this company, a year ago when we were designing this thing, there was no talk about this lead time. There was, it wasn't an issue. Like I asked about that, and oh no, it's 3 or 4 weeks tops. But now it's, it's like like a lot of the jobs we put out to bid. are running into timing issues with lead times on materials. It's not just highway stuff. It's all kinds of construction. The lead times on materials are being very problematic on schedules. So I will keep you abreast as I know. And I think would you like to go over the Phragmites? Well, if you have any other questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Just on the road closure part. I was going to ask you about a start date. You cleared that one up. And I just wanted to know if there was going to be signage up on
yes.
all the roads going prior to the date of closure, letting people know when
Yes.
when it will be closed.
Yes.
Thanks.
I likewise, just on the timing piece, I mean, like, do we know this is a year-end project? Is it a 6-month? Any guidance on that? Because if we're talking, this could be 6 months out, is it something we could just iterate that maybe we'd like it done during the school summer recess, just so there's less traffic affected by the project?
We had talked about timing of this. It was decided to do it not in the summer because of the more traffic in the summer. We decided to wait till the fall or an early spring start. Timing-wise, we didn't put any restrictions in the bid when the contractors bid on it as far as when he can close it, or we would like the road closed, during a school recess. There's nothing to that effect in the bid. If we were to try to ask the contractor to do that, he might come in as an extra. I have yet to talk to him about that yet.
Okay, because I mean, obviously the safety around the school with the extra traffic's got to be one of our major concerns. The other street that I think could potentially be impacted by this quite a lot is Sandlot Road, which is down the south on School Street. For those people coming from the east, looking to kind of go north on Springs Fireplace Road, they're going to take a left down School Street. And instead of going down to the main junction, I could see a lot of people are going to suddenly turn off onto that road, which may impact residents on that street. So maybe communication or just some traffic planning around that area would be something to consider. Those are my two kind of main comments.
I just have one more that I just thought of. If you're going to change the design with an alternative corrugated steel, would that affect, would that have to go to the DEC?
No, we're going to try to find the same product, but a different manufacturer. It wouldn't have to go to DEC. It'd be an in-kind, just a different manufacturer. Same equipment, same pipe, different supplier.
Thank you.
Just one question. I mean, you might be coming on to stay with the Phragmites piece, but are there any known engineering methods that can prevent the recurrence? Because obviously removal is going to be a major part of this project, but they're invasive species. By nature, they're going to reoccur. So,
well, that's how they got there in the first place. Right. I mean, we are going down like 6 feet. Because apparently, I think it was 4 feet the roots go down, so they went an extra 2 feet to try to make sure there wasn't a little piece of root left somewhere. But the standard throughout the industry on the frag removal is to go down 6 feet. It seems like a lot. I know some of the Phragmites come up near the bridge, but I am not digging 6 feet down next to this existing structure. I don't know what kind of footing is in there. I don't know if there's any piles, so we're staying off the foundation of the bridge a bit, because that'll be rip anyway. But the Phragmites that are growing right next to the bridge will cut off, and we're going to cover with filter fabric and riprap. Okay. I'm not going to dig 6 foot down next to this structure.
So overall, the end result is going to be a safer bridge up to modern standards that's going to look exactly the same and have a better vista of Pussy's Pond.
Correct.
Right. And
that was the charge that Kate gave us. She didn't want to change the aesthetics at all. So
this project actually goes back further than 2022. I was actually the liaison to the Spring CAC beginning in 2018, and it started out as a beautification project. The folks on the CAC wanted those walls painted white and then that's when we
needs a little more than paint.
Yeah, that we couldn't paint.
Well, that was another thing I should mention also. The existing road section, has like 24 feet of pavement, and then it has like 4 feet of grass on each side. That grass actually is not helping the matter either, because any storm water that falls in there or salted water for de-icing will actually seep into that grass and sit on top of that pipe also. So when we're doing the restoration project, restoring the roadway, we're actually going to pave from parapet to parapet. that'll prevent any stormwater from getting in there, but it'll also be able to use, bicycle or pedestrian.
So we'll have like fog lines painted and then.
Yes, there'll be a
and then-
shoulder line.
So there'll be.
It'll be like a
place for
5 or 6
folks.
foot strip. You'll have the travel lane and a 5 or 6 foot strip of asphalt there when you hit the parapet.
Yeah, and Ian, I believe the CAC is very much in favor of this project. They were when I was the liaison, I think when you were as well.
Yeah, everybody's in favor and excited to see it going forward. The timing is going to be key because I understand there's a DEC restriction in the springtime and perhaps winter weather is tough. And so we'll have to figure out this pipe and I think proceed sooner than later if
Yeah.
possible.
I mean, the only restrictions I really have with the culvert is the epoxy coating. I have temperature, so I can't apply it in a low temperature. So if we run too late and that has to be done and wait till the spring, we'll get as much work as we can do. Get done.
So I have some slides on the fragments.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Good morning. Melissa
morning.
McCarron, still getting used to my new name. So like you have just been saying, this is kind of a continuation of previous works, and this has been coming for quite some time. The town of East Hampton did a Phragmites removal project on the west side of Pussy's Pond in 2016 when I first started here. And we also applied for a DEC permit to do this work in 2021. And then it just kind of made sense to bundle it together as some of the Phragmites needs to be removed to gain access to the bridge for this work. And it just kind of made sense to all do it all at the same time. So just a little bit of background on Phragmites australis. It is an aggressive invasive species. It was introduced from Europe in the 1800s. It grows up to 20 feet tall, so it outcompetes and displaces native plants, lowers biodiversity, and provides unsuitable habitat for a lot of animals. So it creates a dense thicket of above ground biomass, but it also has rhizomes below the surface that make it such a difficult plant to get rid of. It sends out runners, so it spreads very quickly. And then, like Jim said, the biomass underneath the ground can be 4 feet. So it's a big effort to remove. So we have actually found in some of these projects that we've been working on that mechanical physical removal is the most successful and most gives us a good time frame to allow the native plants to come back and actually compete. So this proposed work is removal of 6,000 square feet of this invasive plant. And we also plan to install 185 linear feet of core logs, which would be to stabilize the shoreline. After all the Phragmites is removed, we want to make sure that that soil stays in place and we can get those plants to come in and revegetate the area. So we'll also be using turbidity curtains and silt fencing to reduce any sediment runoff into the pond, and we'll be completing a native revegetation after the Phragmites is removed, so those plants can actually have a fighting chance in growing in this area. Yeah, just click. So this is just a photo that kind of shows that dense mat of rhizomes and why this is so difficult to eradicate completely. That's from our 2016 removal on the west side by the blacksmith shop in Springs on Parsons Close. And then this is actually about a year or two after the Phragmites was removed on that side. This was all actually a volunteer Baccharis that grew back on its own from the native seed bank. And then we actually worked with Cornell Cooperative Extension. They installed a core log on the toe of that side of the pond as well to stabilize it. And then they planted Spartina in that area. So this is the native planting plan for the revegetation of this proposed project. So the goal is to provide a diverse native habitat, suitable plants in different zones. So wetland plants at the shoreline, and then moving upland a little bit more dry tolerant plants. So in zone 1, we're going to have the core logs, and those are going to be planted with Spartina. That it's actually planted right on the core log. And then right behind that, we'll have wet tolerant plants. So we'll have this swamp rose mallow, cardinal flower, little blue stem, seaside goldenrod, New England aster, and New York ironweed. So some of those plants are indicated on the slide, those photos. And then behind that area, we'll have zone 2 plants. So summer sweet, red osier dogwood, northern bayberry, ironwood viburnum, and high bush blueberry. So then also we'll be protecting some of the native mature trees in the area. And then in the upland area, utilizing erosion control material, so mesh, to keep the sediment in place, the soil in place, and then planting with native wildflower mix to kind of blend in with the existing meadow. Go ahead. So the funding for this project is split. So we got an estimate from the engineers that about 15% of the Phragmites needs to be removed in order to gain access to the bridge for that work. So 85% of that project is a standalone habitat restoration project. So that's coming through CPF water quality. Following the removal of the Phragmites, we're going to have 1 year of an establishment period, which requires the replacement of any dead plants. And then the Natural Resources Department is going to, moving forward, monitor the area and make sure that, you know, we don't have regrowth of the shoots of the Phragmites. Since this is a little bit, I don't know if you could tell really on the site plan, but it's a little bit more isolated patch of the Phragmites. So if we can remove it completely there, we should have a pretty good chance of keeping it, you know, native plantings. So just wanted to reiterate that this is building on previous work that we've done in this area through town projects. We did a park restoration of Pussy's Pond in 2016, which included reestablishing an eroded shoreline. You can see kind of in the photos. We did a buffer establishment. So before the project, you can see there's not a whole lot of plantings on the shoreline. And then after, there's a nice thick buffer. We installed core logs and native plantings. We did a meadow area that you can see in a later slide, and then some bioswales for capturing and treating stormwater. The picture on the left kind of just shows after the Phragmites was removed on the west side. Cornell came in and did the Spartina plantings and installation of the core log. And then also, that's an example of one of the bioswales that's on the east side. Right after a storm event, you can see that it's capturing a lot of that stormwater and allowing it to infiltrate rather than running right off into the pond. And then this is showing the meadow establishment through the park restoration. So before in 2015, it's just all grass. And then 2017, you can see that there's a little more diversity in habitat. I think that was my last slide. Yep.
So interesting, just side note that the west side of Pussy's Pond on Saturday was the scene of 2 of our staff members getting married. They had their ceremony on the west side of Pussy's Pond, Emily Bono and CJ Fisher, and we want to wish them much health and happiness in their years ahead and a happy honeymoon.
And they had a nice view of Pussy's Pond.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, I just have one quick question,
Sure.
Melissa, and congratulations to you as well. It's a tremendous amount of work living in Springs all these years, watching all this transformation that's really been so environmental, impactful in a positive way. Just one quickie, would you just explain what a core log is for folks who may not know? It sounds like we're putting wood logs in.
Yep. Core log is really, I think it's coconut fiber that's in kind of just a log shape that allows water to pass through, but sediment kind of stays behind it. So it is a good medium to kind of stabilize the toe of a shoreline so it doesn't keep, eroding if it's not planted.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for the work you guys have done there. I think that picture speaks 1,000 words to how you've improved the environment there. For the habitat and for the community. So thank you for your hard work.
So if you don't mind going, I believe we have New Springs Superintendent Nancy Carney in the room here. I know Ian has been in discussions long before this project got to this phase into one of the greatest concerns of the town board was about traffic patterns during this construction period on there. When can we work within the DC permitting, but also to be able to make sure that all the residents are safe, understandable, of where the traffic will be going for what timeframes on there. So I know Ian has reached out to PD and Superintendent Carney. I don't know if Ian, any more comments on that?
Yeah, no, I have. Obviously, the traffic patterns are one of the most important parts, the biggest risks here, particularly with the school, with drop-off and pickup. I have reached out to Springs Fire Department. I'm contacting Amagansett Police Department. So making people aware, also at the CAC level. But the most important thing, I think, for me with school buses and school, drop off and pick up is what we're really trying to work around. I've spoken with Jim about coordinating with Keith Grimes to try to schedule around school breaks. I can't make any promises there, but we're well aware of the concerns and potential issues, and we'll do everything we can to minimize it. I feel lucky I inherited this project. A lot of the work has been done over the previous years, but the bridge obviously needs repair, and the Phragmites, anybody who drives by there are really taking over. So very excited to see it go forward. One part of the Phragmites project that's important to me is the maintenance. I know that Natural Resources will be monitoring that. I will follow up with Melissa. We've already spoken a little bit about this. If there's any sort of contractual or budgeting we should do to make sure that once we remove it, it stays removed. But very exciting. I hope we can complete the project in the near future.
And again, that advance notice and signage, I think, is important to Jim's point about any kind of road closures. And also, when you really take a good look at the condition of that bridge, school buses driving over as well as everybody else, you want to see that repair happen.
And I'll remain in contact with Nancy Carney, the Springs superintendent, about potential assistance with directing traffic and coming up with a good plan there. So it's going to be inconvenient, but the work has to be done at some point, and we'll do the best we can to minimize inconvenience and keep everything safe.
And as we talked about, some of this is being funded with water quality money. We also got a $250,000 grant from New York State. So we thank Assemblyman Field for making that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next up we have David and Nick are going to talk about proposed amendments to Chapter 213 Shellfish.
Thank you.
And
I think, we had
Barley Dunnan?
Yes.
Yes, please.
I don't know if Senior Harbor Master Treadwell is also in there.
All I see is Barley right now.
I think, Chelsea, are you pulling up a presentation?
No, she's just pulling up the language.
Okay, because we're having some issues with Joanne. I think you needed to, we need to sign out and sign back in again.
Yep.
It was under the wrong account.
Yeah.
Just ask everyone's patience for a moment. I'm going to do an intro.
We'll have a new Winslow after this weekend. Chelsea will be one Winslow down, one Winslow.
Do you want to start the intro?
Sure. Hello. Good morning, everyone. My name is David Lease, Town Council. Thank you very much. I've been working with Nick Cortesitas, our Assistant Town Attorney, Senior Harbor Master Tim Treadwell, Carol Brennan, and also John Barley Dunn, who I believe is online with us here. We've also been in coordination with the town trustees to try to effectuate some minor changes into the town's code as far as shellfish, in which got put onto our radar last year, in which we want to effectuate minor changes in the town code that allows the town to be able to set the opening of scallop dates in town waters to be in coordination and synchronization with the town trustees, who also sets their dates through resolution of their governing body based on the dates of the New York State DEC openings of state waters and scalloping. Last year it was put onto our radar. There was some confusion in these opening dates that led to confusion either by residents or also by enforcement, our town enforcement Marine Patrol. So we took a hard look at this again and wanted to look into some changes as far as the town code, and Nick will take us through that quickly.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yes, good morning, good afternoon, board. I would like to go through my proposed amendment. I believe you have it in front of you. So as it currently is written, Section 12, Chapter 213, scalps may be taken during the period from the third Monday of October to March 31st, both inclusive, in each year. Bay scallops shall not be taken on Sunday by use of a dredge or other mechanical device operated by power. That last sentence we will keep. Now I want to go through the proposed amendment. So this is how it would read. Scallops, or scallops really, not sure why there's an E in front of scallops. I don't know why that's the thing. Scallops may be taken during the period, comma, the beginning of which shall be determined by town board and/or town trustee resolution in their respective waters under section 213-18 special authority, or in the alternative, if no such resolution is passed for the upcoming season, from sunrise on the first Sunday following the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation opening date until sunset on March 31st. Both dates are inclusive in each year, and the harvesting period shall apply in town and trustee waters as defined in section 246-2, waterways and boats. And again, we are going to keep that same language, that no dredging or mechanical device operated on Sunday is allowed. We added this extra language for a couple of reasons, one of which is we wanted to establish a little bit more of legislative uniformity. And another reason is the town trustees in recent resolutions rely on the town code, so we wanted it to reflect their reliance thereon. And also we added the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation opening date as a safety valve or a default date in the event that no such resolution is passed.
And yes, and that's pretty much perfectly stated there, Nick. So the town is looking to try to coordinate with the trustees, obviously, here between their opening their waters and the town waters, which is mostly specifically Lake Montauk, and then also be uniform with what the state DEC opening dates are. But what we want to do is, if just in case if there's any changes that can be through major rainfall events, growth rates or such, that we actually have redundancy in our town code to be able to set through resolution a change to that date also, which we would coordinate through our aquaculture department with the actually town trustees also. So those are the changes we're looking to do. We're looking, if the town board supports this, I would like to schedule a public hearing for this from this coming Thursday for October 3rd, so that we can be ready for the opening of this scallop season for 2024 also.
I'm supportive.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense to me, and I'm supportive, and thank David and Nick for working on it.
I would have to say I want to thank Tim Treadwell, John Aldridge, who's also here from the trustees, for giving input, and John Dunn also then too, and Carol for looking. There's other sections we'll get to, but this one is more timely than others then too.
I'm supportive. I would just add that, you know, if there are those who enjoy going for scallops and others shellfish in the town, if you see any impacts unintended of this that could affect, you know, your ability, do feel free to reach out to us. That's why we have the public hearing. It's to take on board those thoughts that we may have not seen. So that's the process.
Okay. So I think we're good.
Very good. And I have a joke for the board.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Why do scallops never share?
Go
Because
ahead.
they're shellfish.
All right, keep your day
That's
job.
it for me.
John, Aldrich is asking.
Oh, John, did you want to address the board? Great. Welcome, John.
I hope you don't have another joke.
I just had a question. I think you mentioned it, David. I didn't quite get it, but I just want to make sure that this new code language will be in effect by the time that the state opening takes place, so that we don't have to write any resolutions. Because if we did have to write a resolution changing the date to what the code language is now going to read. We would have to do it at our next meeting on Monday.
Understood. So that's why I appreciate the supervisor putting this on to the agenda for today. If we notice the public hearing for this Thursday, we'll have the public hearing on October 3rd. And then we can potentially pass this at Town Board work session on October 7th, and which will give us enough time for us to be in effect, hopefully by, for the upcoming season, based on the DEC calendar.
Well, we may need to do an after hearing resolution, and yeah, the 8th is the next work session. When does the season start, John?
Well, let's see.
Currently, the town code reads, would be the 21st of October. If the new language goes into effect, the town season would start November 10th. But we have to make sure the old code language is not going to be in effect.
Would it make sense then for you to just to do the resolution, belt and suspenders?
Ask, we
Yeah.
could pass a resolution and put it in the
I think
works.
so. I think
would-
you do, yeah, belt and
I
suspenders.
think that's part of the redundancy we're trying to build up by doing these changes. I would recommend that of your board if you
I
want.
would think you might want to do that too, in case something doesn't work out timing wise, so that Lake Montauk is in coordination with the.
We'll take that under advice. Thank you, John, for sure.
Great.
Okay, great.
Thank you, John.
I'd just like to thank you, David and Nick, for taking this on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up, we have Eric Shantz here. He's got two topics. We're going to start with affordable housing developments, proposed density, and code corrections. All right,
Hi, I'm Eric Shin.
assistance working here?
No, I was going to sit there if that's okay. It
Okay,
makes it
yeah,
easier
that's
for me with
fine.
my notes.
Yep.
But I figured I'd introduce myself at the podium. I'm Eric Shantz, the Director of Housing. So as the supervisor said, I have two items on. The first one is a discussion of the maximum permitted density for traditional affordable housing developments, those being non-senior ones. The board already has discussed and approved a code amendment for senior-only affordable housing developments. But we're offering for the board's consideration the option to increase the permitted density for non-senior from 8, which is the 8 units per acre, which is the current provision, to 12 units per acre. So with that, I will screen share, hopefully. Hopefully I'll get it right. Yep, looks good. Just make sure I can. Annoying. There we go. Sorry, just wanted to make sure I had that right. So I should also mention that included in here are some minor code corrections, just cleaning up some discrepancies that exist within the town code related to affordable housing developments, but I'll explain those when I get to them. So as I said already, the town board has recently changed the code to permit up to 12 units per density for senior-only affordable housing developments. The town board also has on today's agenda, after this item, discussion of a potential new use in the town code called an employee housing development. That has been crafted permitting up to 12 units per acre of density. So the town board should consider changing that for a traditional non-senior affordable housing development, because if, with the senior only change being adopted and then the employee housing development change being considered, if that were to be adopted, then traditional non-senior affordable housing units would be the only one of those similar uses that were limited to 8 units per acre. We feel that this is a good consideration. Primarily because, and we touched upon this with the senior only, the Suffolk County Department of Health Services will permit, technically will permit any density of housing units that a municipality might permit in local zoning if sewage treatment is provided. Obviously, we're not proposing to go, sky's the limit on this. We're looking to coordinate it with the senior affordable housing units in terms of the maximum permitted density. But that's just important to note that if sewage treatment is provided, the only applicable restriction is that's self-imposed, for lack of a better term. Additionally, when we were looking at this change for senior-only affordable housing, we looked at we always, SECRA and the environmental review requires you to look at the worst-case scenario. We looked at the worst-case scenario regarding traffic for senior only and actually non-senior affordable housing units at the time, and found that it doesn't really significantly increase the amount of generated traffic on the site. I'll get into that in more detail. And then also, really, what this will do is, for the most part, I think it's going to impact the few vacant lots that we have out here that have the Affordable Housing Overlay District designation, which, by the way, is a prerequisite, and a property would have to have that overlay designation for any of these changes to be applicable. But basically, we think that the few vacant ones out there, but then the existing affordable housing developments, which have been found to be appropriate sites for an affordable housing development, it gives them a little bit of leeway and a little bit of an option to expand. So here is that in more detail. We don't need to get into the details of every single line here, but basically, this is a breakdown of if you adopted this code change, all of the properties that are within the Affordable Housing Overlay District, how many units they have now, how many they could go up to as a maximum under the current town code, and then how much they could go up, what the addition would be if you change the code to permit up to 12 units per acre. So basically, if you kind of focus here on the green numbers at the end, so you have 3 vacant sites. Obviously, if you change the code, obviously there's nothing on there now. If you change the code, a future development would be permitted more density. The total across those 3 sites would be an additional 25 units. Keep in mind, though, included in there is Route 114, which technically right now is vacant. There is, has been discussed by the board many times, a plan for development of that property by the East Hampton Housing Authority at a total of 50 units. And then I believe the change here was going to be 9 units for that site. So in theory, you could say that that's 16, but just for the purposes of covering bases here, I included it. We have 3 existing senior-only affordable housing developments. Obviously, as we do the environmental review of this, we will consider those being redeveloped as traditional affordable housing, but keep in mind, senior is now permitted to go to 12 units per acre, so there is no change on those. Additionally, there are 6 lots right now that have the AHO designation, but do not have the requisite minimum lot area. Obviously, this would not affect them because they're not eligible for this use anyway. There are 5 lots or sites that are improved with uses other than affordable housing developments. Technically, the additional yield that would result if you made this code change would be 15 units. However, I said this when we were reviewing the senior-only change. I don't think there's any plan to remove the Montauk Playhouse anytime soon and replace it. So I think really the realistic development potential on those lots is minimal, if nothing. So really the main effect here might be on the 7 that are already improved with non-senior affordable housing developments. You can see that I listed them there on the screen. More of these, well, really the 2 at the bottom, the Manor House condominiums and Cantwell Court, are not really relevant to this. Their ownership opportunities, Cantwell in particular is a subdivision. It's not an affordable housing development. So those really aren't applicable, but as you can see, we gave the numbers there. In theory, you could get 12 more units at the Manor House site, which is already pretty cramped. I don't think that that's realistically feasible. And then in theory, you could get 4 more at Cantwell Court, but that would require abandoning that subdivision, doing a new affordable housing development that's 40 plus units, and obviously there's no intention of that. So if you look through the list here, I highlighted in green the ones that would jump out. Whalebone Village, in theory, could get 12 more units. Springs Fireplace Apartments could get 12 more, and Gansett Meadows could get an additional 5. Although that number is incorrect. I apologize now that I'm looking at it. Could go to 18. Yes, I apologize. That should be 8, not 5. But again, with all of this, we will do an environmental analysis that does the breakdown for each of these properties, and I'll make sure the numbers are exactly correct. So really, when you do add that up, and the memorandum that I prepared for the board does have a breakdown of every property individually, in theory, the maximum number of additional units across all properties currently zoned with the AHO would be 160. If based on this breakdown that we have here, and with those assumptions that we're not going to be removing the Montauk Playhouse, that number is really 54, although that might be 57 if that changed against Meadows. But basically, it's less than a third of what the theoretical maximum would be. And then, as we touched upon with the senior housing, there are a lot of site constraints that apply to these properties. And in fact, if you look on those 7 that are improved with non-affordable housing developments, you'll see that, for example, Acabonic Apartments has 50 units right now. The maximum under the town code is 60, and they do have the requisite lot area to go up to 60 now. We're not proposing any change to the maximum number of units on any one site. So I'll get to that in a minute about safeguards. So really, this code change doesn't affect them at all. They could increase the size of that development under the current town code density. And they haven't done that for various reasons. When they came in for site plans, site constraints, the site planning process. So even though, the last number you have on this slide is 54, I think it'll be less than that. Again, that's sort of a good and a bad thing. I don't think this change would have a big impact, which is a bad thing in the sense that we wouldn't get a substantial number of additional affordable housing units out of it. But we would get more out of it on sites that are already deemed appropriate, and every little bit helps. So,
Eric, can I I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think it's good to just ask this question now. One of the considerations on whether you can permit increased density of more than 8 acres per unit is where sewage treatment is provided. So how many of those existing properties have sewage treatment?
Well, going through this list of 7 here, the Green at Gardner's Point does, Whalebone Village does not, Springs Fireplace Apartments do not, Acabonic Apartments does not, Gansett Meadow does, Manor House does not, Cantwell Court does not, but again, those are not really applicable. So a good point, because as I'll get to in a second, if you are to permit this change, we have a list of recommended specific safeguards, and one of those would be immediately going to sewage treatment on the property. That would also be mandated by the county health department. You can't go over the 8 units per acre unless you provide sewage treatment. So in a way, this also provides an incentive for these properties to update the sewage treatment. I think the big thing here, and it's something that we focused on with the senior-only housing developments, would be the potential additional generated traffic. I guess just focusing on the one that has the potential for the largest number of units here, and I'm sorry, I did the math wrong, it's 18, not 8. Gansett Meadows has the largest single potential increase, and technically on a weekday, which is the highest generating, traffic generating time, as per the Institute of Transportation Engineers, that would generate an additional 121 trips if they went from 37 up to the maximum that would be permitted. Again, that's the largest single increase on any one site, would be 18 units at Gansett Meadows. Although that seems like a large number, if you broke that down over a 10-hour day, from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., you're talking about an additional vehicular trip about once every 5 minutes. Traditionally, with traffic studies, you don't calculate it that way. You do what's called peak hour. They focus on the peak hour, that would be active, so usually in the AM and PM. But basically, when you do that, you're looking at a couple of vehicular trips every minute. You're not talking about a lot here. But basically, we broke this down to highlight it, and attached to the memorandum that was provided to the board and is posted online is a breakdown of the additional vehicular trips site by site. So An important thing to remember here, though, again, is that every site is already capped at a maximum of 60 units. So even though you're talking about more generated traffic on one particular site, if it is, already at or close to the maximum under 8 units per acre, and it could add units at 12 units per acre, you're still capped at 60 units. So the theoretical maximum on any one site would be 60 units in the vehicular trips that are generated. So what I did here, the last 2 bullet points for you are just because the traffic generation is based on a weekday and then a weekend, a Saturday, what any 60 unit site would generate in terms of traffic. And again, if you broke that down over a 10-hour window, you're looking at one vehicular trip basically every minute and a half.
Can I just ask, is the source that you're using takes into account that this is affordable housing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because from what I understand is that depending on the income level, folks tend to have fewer cars than say, my household at this point.
For sure. I think it's more pronounced when you look at senior versus non-senior, but yes, it's that Institute of Transportation Engineers, their trip generation manual has uses listed, and then they've done surveys over many decades of various sites and measured vehicular trips. So it's the industry standard when you're doing that. And the planning board and zoning board sometimes often require traffic studies, and everybody uses that manual.
Thank you.
So again, I touched upon it a little bit earlier, but safeguards, right now, and this wouldn't change, any new affordable housing development, regardless of its density, would need a site plan special permit approval from the planning board. That's usually many, many months, if not a year, of a process of the planning board going through all the details of the proposal. The way that I've crafted this code amendment is to require a separate special permit from the planning board if any existing or new development is going to go above 8 units per acre in density. Again, to a maximum of 12 units. But if they do go or propose to go over 8 units per acre in density, they have to do the following. They have to provide sewage treatment. They have to provide a study known in various parts of the code, or one part specifically as an economic analysis. It's a bit of a misnomer, but really that's a study that identifies the increased enrollment on the school district. The other thing they would have to do is provide a traffic study. That has to show the impact on level of service, which is a specific term on adjacent roadways and intersections. The reason for that would be that our town code, in the list of type 1 actions under SECRA, projects that significantly alter level of service on a roadway, meaning cause delays by generated traffic, become type 1 actions. So rather than leaving it to the discretion of the planning board, we're saying to them, right in this code restriction, you must require all of these things. It must be submitted by the applicant, and you must review it. And then there are 2 that are more are suggested. Those 3 are absolutely mandatory. But there's wording in the proposed code change that the planning board should seek to have additional buffers and screening given this increased density. And then that they should not be granting this additional special permit for this higher density if the applicant can't propose something that doesn't conform to the town code's dimensional requirements. So in other words, there's nothing you can do to prevent somebody from seeking a variance. But if all of these units don't fit on the site, the planning board shouldn't be giving them this special exemption in the form of this unique special permit. So there's a little bit of redundancy there in terms of a review. If somebody designs this and they're over coverage, they're within this required setbacks, things like that. So that's an additional safeguard that was added. And again, just to remind you, affordable housing developments, which is this use definition, they're only permitted on lots that have the AHO, or Affordable Housing Overlay District designation. There's only a select number of properties. Again, there's really only 2 that are vacant right now. And the town board controls the placement of that overlay district. So if there are, right now, the number of properties that this would affect are set, they are limited. And if there's going to be more, that requires a separate environmental review and public hearing from the town board to rezone properties as such. So
So can I just ask a question? So just so I understand, so I think for discussion, we have to decide, do we want this to be by special permit? Or is it basically, not as a right, but you have the ability if you can meet setbacks and coverage and all that, right? So if I have 5 acres and I want to develop affordable housing, and this was in place, I could do 40 units at 8, or I could do 60 units at 12. I have to go for, I guess, how does the process work, right? So I'm looking to develop a project. Am I looking to go for funding first? Because I just don't want to have somebody, go to the expense of creating a project for 60 units and get all the way then to the planning board and get shot down. And now I'm redesigning and I'm starting all over. Like, where in the process does this work? And I just want to make sure that by going with a special permit, we're helping, the applicant and not really blowing up their project where they're already, 50% through design.
I think, I don't know the exact specifics. My understanding is that it's kind of a tough question to answer because it's somewhat concurrent, and it depends on the funding source. But also keep in mind, even if they're adding units, if this, under the town code right now, they would have to go in front of the planning board basically for any exterior change or new structure or anything like that. So the process is really the same. They would have to go for a site plan application in front of the planning board. By adding the requirement of a special permit, it just essentially gives the planning board more standards with which to review the request, because the general special permit standards would then apply, and then these would as well. I will point out, I think I did in the memo, maybe not in this presentation, that Southampton does have a very similar setup where if you're going to go up to 12 units per acre, which is their maximum, you have to get a special permission, but from their town board, as opposed to the planning board. I set this up where I feel the planning board is more appropriate for reviewing what is basically a site plan matter. So I think that's actually more efficient. But I don't know that this costs them any time, because in the situation where they're going to be doing a redevelopment, adding units, or certainly a new development, they're going to be in front of the planning board anyway for site plan approval. And the planning board is basically going to be checking all of these things. And actually, I think that this saves a developer a little bit of time, and this goes for any use in the town code. If you lay out the requirements for the applicant in the town code and say you're going to have to go to a traffic engineer's firm and get a traffic study, it lets them know ahead of time that they need that information. They don't go to the planning board and maybe once or twice, and then the planning board forms a consensus that they're concerned about traffic and says, should we require a traffic study? It's written out for them ahead of time that they need to do this so that they can get their ducks in a row for their submission to the planning board.
Thanks, Eric.
So then there's some other minor sections of the town code, one of which is in the specific special permit standards. I should mention that the change for the density for an affordable housing development is all within the section of the code 255-550, which are specific special permit standards unique to special permit uses. Under affordable housing development, but then multiple residents, which is another one in that same section. It goes alphabetical, of which affordable housing developments are a type of multiple residents. That has to be modified in 2 ways. One is that right now, confusingly, if you look for all of the requirements for an affordable housing development, they're all under affordable housing development in 255-550. That includes almost all of the dimensional regulations, the minimum lot area, the maximum number of units. However, the section that says the size range that's permitted for the units is not in that section. It's in under multiple residents where it says, if you're doing an affordable housing development, the following, shall also apply, which doesn't make much sense. We're literally proposing just to take the section that says, the minimum size of a unit is 400 square feet, the maximum is 1,200 square feet, and move that into the section with all of the other regulations for an affordable housing development. And then there are two that are in the code right now that, first of all, there's a discrepancy as to what the minimum lot area is. We have always gone by 125,000 square feet, or roughly 3 acres. That's actually listed in 2 spots in the code. But in this sort of odd section of multiple residents, it says 170. So what do you go with? We've always gone with 125. I've always heard too that the lesser restrictive, is what will apply. I think the town board is fine with that. We're not proposing to reduce it beyond 3 acres. But this is a discrepancy that needs to be cleaned up. And then there's also a provision in there that says the maximum is 8 units per acre, which is also redundant and unnecessary with other sections of the code, and exactly the thing that we're looking to change. So obviously you would need to change that. But I think if you strike that, it's the cleanest way to do it. So basically, like any other code change here, and I obviously defer to the town attorneys on all matters related to process, but you should have a discussion about this. You may want to amend the way that, I took a stab at changing the town code, those specific recommended changes. This will have to go in front of the planning board and planning department. They can take a look at it too and make recommendations and refine it. That's a code requirement that any code amendment has to be referred to the planning board. And obviously, only after you get through that process, but obviously we'll prepare a full environmental assessment. I don't know if that'll come from me or the planning department, but when town staff does that, we'll take a hard look at it as required under SECRA and review all of the potential impacts. So,
great.
That's what I got.
Questions for Eric?
Yeah. Well, can I mind if I go
Sure,
first? Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate the presentation very much. And just a little bit of background. I think Eric alluded to this. This came about with another type of project that we'll talk about later, asking for the 12 units of density, which, as Eric has pointed out, is similar to other towns nearby us, and it's really an economic factor. Affordable housing, you are capped by what you can charge for rent. And so the ability for somebody to build extra units in the same space obviously makes the project theoretically more economically viable. And this board has obviously shown a commitment to affordable housing, and this is just one more tool to do that. If we were going to do it for a different type of use that we're proposing or might be proposed, I wanted to make sure that the regular affordable housing was also included. As Eric noted, we separated senior housing because in the process of looking into all of this, we realized that traffic was less for senior developments, as was sanitary requirements, health department requirements. And so it made sense to separate that because there were 2 factors that made it a much more obvious choice, and I didn't want to let the senior, or we didn't want to let the senior density get bogged down by these slightly more complicated or difficult decisions to make. So want to hear feedback from the community about this, but it's really just an attempt to say we need affordable housing. If this is something that might encourage more projects, we want to do it. We've been careful, as Eric said, the cap is still remaining at 60. So we aren't necessarily creating opportunities for massive developments that would change the community character. We obviously want to be careful to protect our town in the process of proposing more density because, as everybody knows, our town has basically gone the other way in every case. We're trying to limit development and intensity of use in town. I think affordable housing is a worthy exception to that, because if we don't have affordable housing in our town, it brings up a whole host of other issues. So the 2 things that we need to protect against that are the most obvious are environmental concerns, and the fact that you need to create a sewage treatment plant in order to do this, I think alleviates that in large degree. And then traffic, which, as Eric pointed out, each individual project would need to do a study. And the fact that the cap is remaining at 60 and all the numbers Eric broke down, I think show that at least isn't an obvious concern on the whole, that some of these projects could get done without environmental concerns or too many traffic issues. Otherwise, in the development of this, we did think it was important to keep it, all the dimensional regulations the same. So again, it's not extra coverage, building coverage, total coverage. The appearance should be very, very similar. It's just hopefully creating the opportunity for more units in the same space so that we solve this problem as quickly as possible, or help to start to anyway. Kathy brought up a very good point about the special permit, and I think it's a worthwhile discussion. In making a change like this, increasing density of a particular kind of development, 50%, I want to make sure to move, I want to get things done and do things that are going to be helpful, but also be cautious. And to me, a special permit seemed to be appropriate because it's one extra layer with extra standards. Wholeheartedly agree with Kathy's concern that we want to have clarity so that people know when they're able to do this and when they aren't. And frankly, I think if there was such a site where they knew they could, fit within the dimensional regulations, they had done the traffic study, I think the special permit would be granted. That said, I think it's going to be very important to hear the planning board's feedback on this and the planning department's analysis. But I'm certainly really happy to be talking about this, and I currently favor it and look forward to moving it to public hearing and hearing what other board members say.
Well said, Ian.
Shall I go that way? We can go that way. Eric, in terms of the special permit, is public water one of the requirements?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I think in theory, I think of this as an opportunity to increase affordability as a goal in the town. And of course, I'm always talking about the comprehensive plan, and the affordable housing plan has been adopted into our comprehensive plan. So I think looking at ways that we can have development from our existing affordable housing regulations that I think were probably done in the 80s, once again, where we haven't changed these specific suite of changes for quite some time, while the need has increased dramatically, and the unaffordability of the town has also increased dramatically with house prices. So I think if we're going to use the word crisis as we do often and mean it, then we should support this type of density for affordable housing overlays. I think it's very important for me that we ensure that whether these are privately developed, so this would include private developments as well, not just town developments, correct?
Correct.
That the affordability aspect has to be the strongest guardrail for me. When you're under normal site plan review, when you're talking about, you do the example of the additional numbers, there still has to be buffers. There still has to be lot taken out for screening, buffers, for a little bit of open space as in our code, and also for the area of the sewage treatment plant, which obviously can't be built on. So even these yields are a little adventurous to what would be there. The only other question I have is in the special permit, which I think if the qualifications of the special permit are well defined, because we're going to go to and ask the planning board, or this town board is going to talk about this in this time period, but we also have to make sure things are doable in the future, right? Future boards, different makeups, et cetera. So under your safeguards, where you said additional buffers and screening, is there a definition of what that means?
Well, so basically, here's what I added. Buffers and screening, this is basically recommended to the planning board of an extra condition. Property setbacks for buildings and structures shall meet the minimum required in the MF multifamily zoning district, which is the requirement right now. Where possible and appropriate, the planning board shall require greater setbacks and substantial screening of the development from adjoining properties in the form of fences, evergreen screening, or the like. And then the next part here is a continuation from something in the code. Berms, retaining walls, or other hardened or opaque structures which substantially alter existing grade or create the visual effect of walling in the development should be avoided.
Yeah.
So basically, it's just a recommendation to the, this is not mandatory. It doesn't say, and obviously it's something you could include where you could say, the total lot coverage or, clearing could be lessened. But that's basically just directing the planning board to think, okay, you're adding density here. You need to provide extra buffers and screening on this site.
So that's native evergreens, right? All native species in terms of buffers.
This is intended to be landscaping. So it's intended to be things that buffer, not areas of revegetation. But that is something that could be worked into it if.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that because the maintenance of stuff like that, and also because of the impacts of non-native. We require native vegetation. We're trying to promote that across the town.
Just keep in mind, there's a distinction here between this isn't, and certainly I understand the importance of preserving tracts of native vegetation or replacing them with revegetation. But I'll point out the distinction here. This is really meant to be for landscaping, because there's already going to be landscaping and for screening of the development. This is basically saying you need more of it. There's a distinction here between revegetation and, landscaping that is used to screen out a site. But, obviously there could be something in there that could say, native species shall be chosen. But the planning board, the planning department already, when somebody submits a landscaping plan for a development like this or anything similar, the planning department sits down, looks at it, identifies whether or not there are native, non-native, or certainly if there are invasive species, and recommends that they be changed. In the plan. So there already is kind of a safeguard in there where we try to work in as much native vegetation as possible. But just keep in mind that this isn't really talking about preserving tracts of land as natural habitat. It's talking about, when you have a big development like this, and some of these will probably end up, most of them, if you go to that density, will be 2-story buildings. It's more talking about, a row of white pines or something that is done, to screen the facility out, as opposed to augmenting existing native vegetation.
But can I ask, we're not increasing the maximum number of units. We're at 60 units.
Yep.
So
And we're not
you're
increasing
putting a
building
different,
coverage.
right, but you're putting a different set of criteria. So if I limited it to 8 units per acre and still got my 60, I don't have to do additional buffers and screening. But if I go to 12 units and get my 60 units, I have to do additional buffers and screening.
Yes, although with the distinction that of the sort of 6 requirements that I put in here, you need a special permit. That's a mandatory requirement if you're going to go up above 8 units per acre. You need sewage treatment. That is a mandatory requirement.
You're doing that anyway. If all of the newer projects all have sewage treatment.
True, but technically under the regulations, you can do one up to 8 units per acre and not need sewage treatment. So we're just making it clear that that's mandatory, but you're right. Most of them do that anyway because it makes sense.
Because when you went through the list, it's the newer ones that had the sewage treatment. It's the older ones that didn't.
So, and again, that might be a good way to get them to update their sewage treatment.
But that triggers through the health department.
I just want to finish the point of the other thing that is mandatory is the impact of enrollment on the school district, the economic analysis, but the buffers and screening, and then recommending that the planning board not grant this special permit if an application needs variances. Those are essentially suggestions and guidance for them. There's no mandatory requirement or changing of any of the hard numbers on it related to buffers and screening. I'm not proposing to change the maximum building coverage that they can do, which is 20%, the maximum total lot coverage, which is 75%, the amount of clearing that would be permitted on the property. None of those change.
But that did come up though in another discussion that we're using, as far as coverage is concerned, we're using residential coverage calculations for.
Not for these, because the code already directs the planning board and development to use the setbacks and coverage requirements of the MF multifamily zoning district. So, which is the zoning district that was essentially set up for multiple residence developments, but private open market non-affordable housing multiple residence developments. So in fact, almost all, I think all of the MF zoning that we have is actually along the strip of Panago here. So a few of those developments, I don't remember, without calling them out by name, but if you drive down here and you look and you see those multi-unit developments, I think most of those are in the MF zoning district, if you were in RS resort, but.
Yeah, I guess my point is that if we're not increasing the minimum to 60, do we want as part of the special permit that you have to do additional buffers and screening? Because it's costly, for the,
My concern is the word shall.
Yeah.
I think that can be looked at too harshly, in a way then too. So that's in your site conditions under I-5. It shall require greater buffers. I don't think it shall require.
Yeah, no, you're right, and that's a really important distinction in the verbiage.
Could consider instead of shall.
Yep.
That was the short of it. I don't like that word in there.
and that's going to be considered on an individual basis before the planning board anyway.
A shall is pretty finite.
Yeah,
that's true.
And again, this does have to go in front of the planning board, and I haven't sent this around to the attorneys or the planning department yet. They'll review it as well, and I'm sure there will be further refinement of the language here. But on the bright side with this, the changes are very much limited. Like I said at the end of the slideshow there are a few like cleanup elements here that I'm proposing, but for the most part, it's really just that section of the code that says the maximum permitted density is 8 units per acre, and changing that to say you can go up to 12 if you do the following, and then just refining the language and the requirements.
I think, just adding one point, I think the traffic study is great. One thing I think we've been smart about doing, and I don't know if it's a requirement, if we want to make a requirement, but public transportation to and from these locations is, even when we get special permits, just putting this many more cars on the road, traffic is number 2 complaint after household availability. So if there's any way to encourage or just, even ask that if you're going to go to this kind of scope of development, you have a public transportation plan associated with this property as well.
Well, you have to look though, Suffolk County now has their new bus service is on demand, right? So it's almost they come to your residence to pick you up. So when we used to look at affordable housing, we looked to see if it was on the bus route. Well, now, we're all on the bus route.
Everywhere and nowhere.
So I've actually used that bus system a couple times effectively, when I drop my car off to get it. So here's my plug for that. That system's working pretty well right now then too. I have to go get my car for getting inspected or whatever. I picked it up. Well, sorry, off the rail. But that is correct then too. I know they put bus shelters over at Kansas Green, but that's changing. And now sometimes when you might be looking for strengthening of applications for funding at different levels, yes, they look at those also. It can be there. I have one in your design, and C in design is the recreational aspect of it. There's a smaller recreational facility. I don't know how appropriate that is for all facilities. To have to require that then too. I don't know if that's a town requirement or is that going to be something, a state requirement on there?
It's not a state requirement. It's essentially a town, self-imposed, if you want to call it, town-created restriction. That's something that I had discussed with the former planning director. We had some conversations about it. That, I guess the bottom line is that is in the code right now. I didn't change that at all. It's a requirement. I did look at that particularly under the consideration that if you're doing more units on this property, space is going to be even more at a premium. But what I didn't want to, that is a requirement that essentially means at the end of the day, there's going to be an open space area and maybe a lawn or a playing field or of some kind that
playground.
I understand the aesthetic of it. So I didn't want to remove that from it.
And I don't want to derail where we're at on here. So I got 2 comments that could derail it later or add to it. I will say, I apologize. Ian, thank you. I would like to move this forward. Personally, I've talked about this a long time ago. I think this is appropriate, particularly with the safeguards you're putting forward on it. I would like to take I would like to take this public hearing as is, with some of these comments, that we just discussed, changing the verbiage of shall, I think is appropriate. 125,000 square feet is, I believe, what's appropriate. I would personally like to look into even lowering that in appropriate locations then too, because some of the locations, we don't have lots of that size as much anymore. And if you had an acre lot, and let's say, you could put it on right now where if it's 56, 600 square foot apartments on there, 5,600 square feet on an acre lot, you can get 8 or 9 of them. If you can fit all, meet everything else, that would be appropriate in potentially a centralized hamlet locations where you want some of that affordable housing. So I would like to think about that next, and that can go over the next couple of years if you wanted to say then too. But I think when you put safeguards into it, I think that's something we have to look at for what's the land that we have available right now then too.
Can I just,
Besides that, that's all I have.
can I just respond to a couple of things? Because I think this is a really good conversation. I appreciate everybody's comments. Kate brought up affordability, and that's obviously of the utmost importance. We wouldn't be talking about increased density if it weren't for affordable housing, but there are restrictions both on what rent can be charged and what the what the sale price is on units, although this is a rental, so it's really just what can be charged, and on for affordable housing, what someone's income is. So those safeguards are as tight as they can be, I think, as we know right now. Transportation's already a consideration for affordable developments, although as everybody pointed out, that type of thing is kind of changing anyway. But
by the code, it mandates that when you're looking at adding an AHO on the property, so even before you're doing this development, when you're zoning the property with the AHO, the town board has to consider proximity to public transportation.
But the good points to make sure that what it says to look at is still relevant today. But obviously, we don't want these things in the middle of nowhere where it's going to be causing those kind of issues. I think Kathy brought up a great point about screening, and it's kind of reminds me of what David is doing with the shellfish, is trying to synchronize things. Why make it more complicated in one case than the other? And I would be okay with eliminating that. I mean, honestly, as an advocate for this, I wanted to make it as palatable as possible and not strip away too many things that made it more difficult. But I think that Kathy's exactly right. The planning board already has discretion on screening. So perhaps we just, the other special permit requirements that Eric mentioned, the traffic study, the sewage treatment plant, I wholeheartedly agree with. But perhaps the screening we could relax. And I think David brought up a really good point on recreation. And frankly, I've talked about this. It sounds sort of mean to say, oh, we're not going to require a recreational area, but in fact, I don't think they're often used, or sometimes they're not. And so, we want to have people have a nice place to live with a recreation area. It sounds great, but are we in fact creating developments that are constrained by the recreation that's not being used and could have been a nicer development without that? I think totally open to considering that. I don't have super strong feelings one way or the other. And David brought up, I think, a really good point, and something Eric and I have encountered in talking about this is the minimum lot area, as well as the cap. We've talked about all these things. And I'll just say that hopefully in the coming months, we'll be able to talk about something that addresses that. I don't know if it's exactly here, but I don't know in town that we want massive affordable housing developments, and perhaps, smaller ones that fit in with the character but house more people would be really, really helpful. I don't know that 12 units on a single acre makes sense, but I think Dave brings up a very, very good point, and I look forward to future discussions with the board.
And in terms of all of what we're talking about, I think the economic feasibility study for the enrollment in the school districts is also very important. So we consider all factors and impacts to increasing the density.
So how do board members feel about leaving in or removing from the safeguards, from the special permit, additional buffers and screening?
I'm okay with that.
Eliminating it or
eliminating it?
Okay.
Because I actually think that, for me, that if we look at some of our most welcoming affordable housing developments, and I always go to Green Hollow, it just fits in with the neighborhood. I don't know why we wall something off or, be afraid to say that this is where people live. We can't see these many units, and it's so limited. And I also, if it's not native, then I don't want to see more non-native species planted around and have to be fertilized, maintained, and watered. And I think that that's in conflict with other areas of the comp plan.
What do you, gentlemen?
I believe it's at the discretion of the planning board. You know, they do site plans, and I think that's the discretion that they have. No need to add shalls or that we have to do that. Let them look at each individual project as an individual project and what is needed for that project to be successful for long term. So I will leave it to those individuals on that board at that time.
Again, it's a green is not hidden, and it's beautiful.
Okay, so I think it's unanimous that we will strike that one.
Yep.
Eric?
Makes sense.
But otherwise, I think we've, we all want to move forward.
Okay.
Yeah, and another thing I figured to the supervisor also, I think, your continuation of moving forward, and Ian also assistance as the liaison, the All Hands on Housing Initiative, that is firmly entrenched in this town board. So thank you, Supervisor.
And I believe we are, when I talk to other supervisors, we're kind of the envy of many communities because we generally don't have opposition to our affordable housing, that it's embraced by the entire community.
Yeah, I think the need
shows
the need for affordable housing in terms of keeping our community together makes itself so present that we have over the years so much more community endorsement of these projects.
All right, Eric, you're up again.
Okay.
Oh.
Just make sure I got that up there. Okay, great. Okay, so what I want to talk about is a proposed new use. So this isn't changes to an existing use like affordable housing development. Obviously, and you can see it on the title slide, the town board has talked about this previously. We had a different name for it. I don't mind what the name is if this, as this moves forward. But in discussions, I think the most appropriate is probably employee housing development. And what this is it's basically, the idea here is to add a mechanism in the town code that allows higher than currently permitted density multiple residence developments. And basically it's offering that increased density if a developer is going to restrict the ownership of the units to being for local businesses and that the tenants are going to be local people that work in the community. So the basic idea here is to create a use that is a type of multiple residence that is going to be built by private development, as opposed to most of the traditional true affordable housing developments that we have. So what you can see here in other slides that I'll be getting to will reiterate this, but the basic model here is that the units would be owned by local businesses. And then the definition here, which again, all of this is up for consideration, but would be a business that has at least 4 full-time employees, has a physical location within the town or a contractor's license, and then obtains a permit from the town, basically just to check the owners and tenants, that they meet the program elements. I'll get to that at the end. We also include in here an option that it could be sold directly to a moderate income family. And then along with that, the tenants would be restricted to being the employees of the business that owns that specific unit, or someone who works and lives within the town, or again, a moderate income family, someone meeting that definition. So the general idea here is to provide this new use and a mechanism where a private developer can build something more than what the town code currently permits. The reasoning they give would be, so that the finances work out of what you're selling the unit at versus what it costs to construct them. But then in turn, sort of the idea here is that increased density would be given, but the sort of the give back is the restriction on the ownership and tenancy of the unit. So I just want to make that clear, and then also make it clear that this use as I've crafted it doesn't meet the definition of affordable housing that is within the town code. And specifically, that is because it is not made available exclusively to a moderate income family. I'll as you saw on that slide, and I'll explain a little bit more, there's an option that you could own or sell or rent to a moderate income family, but it is not reserved exclusively. Part of the reasoning for that is, as you look on that bullet point, you'll see what the income limits are under the town code under that definition, which is 130% of area median income. This board has talked about it in relation to other issues. And then the last time we talked about this general concept, where if you look at a two-person family, the limit is about $162,000. So if you have two individuals that make $82,000 each, they're priced out of what our affordable housing is. So this is something that is expected where the income will routine of the individuals in the development will routinely be above the threshold of what affordable housing is, and not exclusively for a moderate income family. So you can't meet the definition of affordable housing. The other reason that it doesn't is that the initial sale price wouldn't be capped. That's another provision in the definition of an affordable housing unit. And what I provided for you there in the slide is what that means as far as those prices today. You know, the model that we've been talking about when we've been crafting this, you know, the cost of building a development of, let's say, 50 units without federal, state, county subsidies to reserve it as affordable is such that it wouldn't make sense. It would cost way more to build than it would, than you could get back in the sale of the units if you were capped at this. It's not grossly outside of it, and in some of the conversations that we've had with developers that are looking to do this, they expect, and the math seems to work there, that they could maybe sell the units for $700,000, something like that. But again, that's $100,000 more than what the cap would be if they meet the definition of affordable housing. Under this, again, though, sort of the kind of three pillars here under our code of moderate income family, the sales price, or the rent, depending if you're going to sell it or rent it. Under this, it is proposed to cap the rent at 130% of area fair market rent. The idea here, though, is that ideally an employer would own this unit and then would rent it out to one of their employees. So in certain circumstances, there probably wouldn't actually be rent being charged, but included in here is a cap that you can't charge more than what you're permitted to right now for affordable housing. So,
because I think what a lot of employers are doing right now, it's just part of the compensation.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess the last time you had reviewed this concept, we were trying to work it into the Affordable Housing Overlay District, because I was trying to work the provisions where it would meet the definition of affordable housing in other drafts of it, sort of making it so that it would be required in time to sort of become affordable housing. But we don't have those restrictions. There's, the idea here is employers owning it and employees living it, regardless of how much money they make. So, it doesn't meet the definition of affordable housing. You shouldn't permit it in the Affordable Housing Overlay District, which was the plan the last time we reviewed this, was to make it a use that was only permitted in the AHO. I don't think you should do that, if for no other reason than just the common sense fact that I think only affordable housing should be allowed in the Affordable Housing Overlay District. But if you are going to move forward with it, I think what you should do is create a new overlay district, just as we have the Affordable Housing Overlay District for the affordable housing development land use. You could have a new employee housing overlay district that would be really exclusively for this land use. And then actually when you do that, that gives you a lot more control as a town board, because if you permit this use within the AHO, then any property within the AHO is eligible for it, and this could be built, one of these developments in to the exclusion of a traditional affordable housing development. If you have a new overlay district that's specific to this, if you designate that on one property, that's the only place where that use can go. If you designate it on two, it's only those two. And then if you do have a property that you feel is appropriate for traditional affordable housing development and one of these employee housing developments, you could give them both designations. For example, both overlay designations. For example, it's not a one-for-one, but there are a lot of properties that have multiple overlays that aren't just, harbor protection overlay that's related to the environment, that are exclusive to, that are really land use controls. One of the vacant properties that has the AHO right now also has the LBO designation on it, that being 350 Panago right down the road here. So, if you felt it was appropriate, and obviously that's sort of the next step in this process, you'd have to create this use and overlay district as town code changes. But then you would start going into specific properties and specific projects and, whether or not you were going to give that rezoning to it. So, so that's, I think down the road, something you would consider would be where you would put this overlay district and where it would be permitted. But for now, the task at hand is really creating what it is first in the town code. So. Included in this idea, again, this is a completely new use. I submitted a memo to the town board that has a complete draft of possible code that would govern this, really, in particular, the specific special permit standards for it as a use. That's exactly what we were just talking about with the affordable housing development, is its specific special permit standards. So I'm going to run through a list of sort of the specific standards and safeguards that are included in here that are recommended. So some of these, this slide right here will look very familiar because you're basically mirroring what we're recommending for the affordable housing development. That is, any new employee housing development as a use will need a special permit, somewhat obvious, but then also any existing multiple residence development that would want to go above 8 units per acre, which is the effective restriction right now, would only qualify under this use definition, would need to come in for a new special permit. So,
but let me, is it, so talk about multiple residence zoning. What's the number of units that are allowed per acre?
8.
Okay.
And that is limited to, which this is essentially a form of, that's limited to, open market, non-affordable, multiple residences as a use type, which are mostly condo complexes and things like that. Technically, affordable housing developments are a type of multiple residence, but they are one that is restricted for affordability. Again, the other requirement here would be must do a traffic study, must identify the level of service and the impacts in the adjacent roadways, must do an economic analysis that talks about the impact on the school district and increased enrollment, must provide sewage treatment on the facility. So those, we went kind of through the ins and outs of those within affordable housing development, but I think all of those are pretty common sense requirements. So again, in crafting this as a new use, I won't go through all of these line by line, but what this slide is intended to highlight for you is that everything as far as dimensional requirements that are in effect now for an affordable housing development are proposed to be carried over to this new use. That includes the minimum lot area, maximum number of units on a site, the size of the bedrooms, the maximum number of bedrooms, setbacks, building coverage, all of that stuff. The only thing that's different from the affordable housing development in the code as it sits now is that this is crafted to be permitted up to 12 units per acre. We just talked about changing affordable housing development to 12 units per acre, but obviously you're not permitted that as we sit here today.
So Eric, if we were to add a third column that said multiple residence development, how would that change any of this comparison?
Yes. I could go through them. Minimum lot area for a non-affordable multiple residence is 170,000 square feet or roughly 4 acres. I think I remember all these. There is no limitation on the maximum number of units on any one site for a non-affordable multiple residence. There is no limitation on the maximum number of bedrooms, I'm almost positive. There is no restriction on minimum size. Of the units. I would have to double check that. I'm not totally confident on that. And then the setbacks and coverage would be identical to what you see in front of you, the 50 feet, 20 feet, 20 and 75 coverage. So really the only, the change is that there is a larger minimum lot area requirement, and then there are no limitations on maximum number of units and other dimension. Now that I look at it, I think the unit size is limited, but.
Yeah, because I guess the question is, if it's not affordable, it doesn't fit our definition, are we pivoting from affordable housing development, or are we pivoting from multiple residence development?
Yeah, and I tried to mirror affordable housing development because it is more restrictive, generally speaking, than on multiple residence development. But I do want to make it clear, this is, I thought I did so with the second slide, but this is doesn't meet the definition of affordable housing. It is a multiple residence use, another form of it, just as affordable housing development is a form of multiple residence. You start with multiple residents and then you branch off. There's affordable,
but not more restrictive than starting with what the minimum lot size is, because multiple residence is 4 acres versus affordable housing is 3 acres.
Correct. That is more restrictive. So going through specific standards and the legal restrictions, the idea here is to set these up, the units specifically as condominiums. Obviously, the model there is predicated on an employer owning a unit, so you need a piece of real estate that can be owned by an individual or entity. Really, that limits you in a rental facility like this to condominium or co-op. I think condominium makes a lot more sense, and really, I think it makes the most sense to not permit cooperatives, because right now the Community Housing Fund, which again, this isn't affordable housing, so in its bare bones as it would be set up, you couldn't use the Community Housing Fund for anything for one of these uses, but in the future, they might become affordable. I added a provision in here where you could sell one to a moderate income family, in which case it becomes an affordable housing unit. It would meet the definition. And over time, there are provisions in here where over time, these units could become affordable housing units. If a moderate income family buys one of these units, and if it was a cooperative and they otherwise met all the definitions of community housing, and let's say they applied for a first-time home buyer loan, we couldn't give it to them if it was a cooperative, because the CHF can't be used for co-op units. So I think it makes sense to make these condominium units if they have to be one or the other, at least as far as the model goes of how we set this up. So included in the draft code are basically the rules for, a requirement to set up a condominium board, and then sort of the basic, stuff that needs to be included in it, and then being very specific that the, enabling documents. So you think of a condo board agreement or like a homeowners association type thing. That document, a draft of it, has to be submitted to the planning board and their attorney for review during the site plan process. So that, because this is something that I've seen from being with the planning department, of if you're not clear about when in the process these things should be done, a lot of times these legal documents are submitted in draft form at the end, and actually puts the town attorney's office in a weird position where they're forced to look at it and say, oh, well, I don't know if the board really wanted it to be that loose or that restrictive or have this requirement. So right away, we're saying you have to form a condo board, and you got to tell us what the rules are and what provisions you have for the formation, composition, the duties of the board. Also, the fact that the condo board under this is envisioned to be the primary management entity. The town isn't looking to run one of these facilities. You'll see in a later slide, as a safeguard, we do want to require them to get a permit, from my office, most likely, or one of the other town departments, but really housing would be the most appropriate. But that permit would really just be reviewing that the owner or the tenant meet the programmatic elements as far as being an employer, being an employee. We wouldn't be managing this facility. And then I guess, and then the other two things would be that, the condominium board has to lay out what the procedure is going to be when somebody comes in and wants to buy one of these units. If they're not an employer, they're not a moderate income family. What happens if the business that owns it wants to rent it out to somebody who isn't one of those? Obviously, there's redundancy where the town would be reviewing a permit, and it's worded where it's required that every time somebody buys it, there's a change in tenancy, or on an annual basis, they would have to get an updated permit. But it's important to establish what the condo board is going to do to check that and run that by the town. So right away, that's one requirement. The big thing here, at least as far as what makes this a unique idea and unique use, is that there have to be legal restrictions that confine these units to being for owners and tenants. Again, this is reiterating, and this would be submitted again as sort of a separate legal document that is probably covenants and restrictions over the property. And again, has to be reviewed by the planning board and the town attorney's office during the special permit site plan review process before they get an approval, and then say, and then submit something different, or if they were to, that doesn't honor that intention. But basically, you can see this is mirroring a lot of one of the earlier slides. There has to be a legal document that says you can only sell this to owners of businesses or a moderate income family. Businesses as defined there, and then the tenants will only be their employees, people who live or work in the town, or a moderate income family. And then the other restrictions would be that the rent meets the 130% of fair market rent. Leases are for a minimum term of 1 year to avoid excessive turnover. That is something that the town board might want to discuss because I know there is a large need for seasonal housing within the town. However, the way this is set up at the number of units that would be there, I really feel that if you start getting into something that is less than annual, you're going to get into a situation where you have excessive turnover and it becomes very difficult to enforce. Again, thinking of that with the assumption that my department would be doing the, permitting and reviewing of that. So I think the safest thing to do here is to require a minimum term of 1 year. That's what we generally do with affordable housing. But, so that's the recommendation, but it's something obviously that can be discussed. And then two things that are somewhat common sense is that the tenant of the unit have it be their sole legal residence so that they don't own a vacation home. And then that no unit may be sublet. But again, all of these things are for consideration.
Eric, can I just get some clarifications before we move on? Because it's so dense. There's so much information here.
Sorry.
So, no, it's not. Don't be sorry. I just want to clarify the restrictions, right? We say local businesses, but the definition of a local business means that it has a physical location in the town of East Hampton. So if it's a multi-international global corporation and they have a physical address where they do here, that fits the definition. So local is an interesting word to use there. And also the employees, the definitions of a tenant, it's someone who currently works or just resides within the town of East Hampton and doesn't have to work in the town of East Hampton.
Correct. Could be changed.
So you're just a Springs school teacher, you're using the commuter connection and you work here, you don't live here, but you can qualify.
Yeah, I think that's really the idea. And when we were talking about this, tried to look at it from a lot of different angles of, different situations of somebody living here and maybe they work in something that is, truly what everybody would agree is a local business, and then they lose that job or whatever, and then they want to work somewhere else, not creating a situation where they wouldn't meet the programmatic elements here, and then, after their lease was up, they would have to leave because they don't meet.
So they could live here and work on the North Fork or in the town of Southampton, et cetera.
If under the way that this is set up, if they currently live in the town of East Hampton, then, if that individual, if one of the unit owners came to my department to get a permit saying, I want to put this individual in there, and we reviewed the permit, if they can demonstrate that they currently live within the town, they could go in there.
They have to already be residing in the town before they can rent one of these.
Yes. Or if they work within the town.
And if at that time they work within the town and then they lose that job, but now that this establishes residence in the town, then they can work
Yes.
anywhere.
Yes.
So, go ahead.
Sorry.
I was just going to say the under tenants where you've got a moderate income family. I mean, this goes back to, we've used as examples, the Southampton emergency department. If you have a doctor who's married to a teacher that's living there, they would not qualify. They're not making, the two of them together are making over $162,000 a year. So you're saying that a teacher and a doctor couldn't live?
No. I should make the distinction here. It's one of the following in that list.
Oh, okay.
So you don't also have to be a moderate income family. If we did restrict them to moderate income family, they would, well, it would at least be closer to the definition of an affordable housing unit. But that's not for that exact reason.
But why are we, if we're not, if it's not affordable housing under our code, why are we tying it to affordable housing?
Because I think if there's somebody out there who is a moderate income family, which means that they have a need for housing, why not let them be in one of these?
It's not exclusive to that, Kathy. It's another option.
Yeah, it's essentially, it's laying it out as an option.
Tom brought up the last time we talked about this sort of competing with affordable housing, so we were cognizant of that. And we just wanted to be clear that, anybody who would qualify for affordable housing could also live here.
But according to the prices in terms of the ownership, going back up to the moderate income family, would a moderate income family be able to afford $700,000 plus on the price to purchase?
No.
But the rent.
Oh, but it's only one of the following, so they'll be out.
It's one of the options, and then I'm also going to get into a idea to cap the appreciation of the value of the units moving forward, with the idea being that down the road, and I still have to crunch numbers for it, but let's say 15 years, because there's a cap on the appreciation of the resale value of it, that it would be within the realm of what a moderate income family could afford. Or, I mean, the unit owner can sell it for less. Obviously, that they're going to ask for the maximum amount that they have, but I'll get into that in a second. The idea here of leaving an option of a moderate income family owning one of the units or being able to rent it is basic. The other thing that this does is, if there isn't a business out there, if you say the only people that can own these are local businesses that meet these definitions, and then somebody who owns those units, for whatever reason, can't find a local business that wants to buy one of these, then the effective restriction on who can own them is moot. And I would think that basically then, basically you could sell it. It's a real property.
So I just want to go back to the fact that we have a code section for multi-residences. The difference between that code section and what we're trying to get around in this new use is the limit of eight units on an acre. So we're trying to get around that usage, even though they'll be privately owned and et cetera, and it sold, they're not affordable, to be able to increase the specifically, we're solving one problem, increase the density, and that's it.
Well, the rent is restricted too, importantly, so they can't be speculative for people to. Much of our housing stock is obviously rented for or used for a very short season for vacationers. There'd be no incentive for anybody to do that, because what you can charge is limited, to pretty low values. The idea is that that's either going to be valuable for a business who needs to have workers housed, which people already do in other ways, but not very convenient ones or affordable ones. So the rent restriction is real, and which makes it different than a multifamily development, which has no restrictions.
Can you just go back to what the rent restriction is?
Same as affordable housing.
Yeah, one of these slides gives you the actual numbers. There you go. Rent, so sort of in the middle of the slide there. Studio, 2,220, one bedroom, 2,787, two bedroom, 3,260, three bedroom, 4,219. And the way this is crafted, you can't have more than three bedrooms in a unit, so.
But there's no income requirement.
There is not. So, I mean, you highlight something that really, obviously there are more details here, but if you did want to break it down to sort of one key point, it's that this is an idea, with regard to the density, like you said, this is a multiple residence use, and what we're doing is trying to set up one of those where it will be reserved for the employees of the town and the workforce of the town, and in exchange for that restriction, this, private development is being permitted a greater density. So, I mean, really, when you break it down, that's what this is.
The employees of the town, or if you live in the town.
Yes. And obviously the details of how you classify a business, what the criteria are going to be are very, very important, but just in a conceptual sense, that's what it is. We want to create a multiple residence and we're only going to reserve it for, employees and employers. Could you give us increased density in that development in exchange for that restriction? Because it's something, that the argument is that, and I agree with, that the town needs.
I think, to Kate's earlier point, I mean, just going back to the comprehensive plan in terms of what, businesses kind of seem to make up the community. The protections, the hope here is that this is going to be the hospital doing this. This is going to be the mom and pop shops kind of buying into this. But the reality might not be that. As Kate kind of calls out, this could be a corporation coming from anywhere who has a business here and potentially buys one. And, as Kathy also pointed out, this is kind of a form of compensation for them that they have this apartment here. So it gets into some gray areas that just do make me a little bit uncomfortable, frankly. So that's kind of where I'm sitting on this.
And one of the big things that we've been looking into is just what you can enforce and what you can't. So,
Right.
Not that I think the town board would want to, but if you wanted to get specific enough of saying, this business can own a unit, this type of business, you can't do that.
Right.
So unfortunately, it sort of leads you to a more, broader requirements.
And how does it ensure that we can enforce that the rent does not exceed 130 of the FMR? How is that enforceable?
Through a permit that's required from our office.
But like an ADU or a, commercial apartment, we'd have that already in place.
So, I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm a country club. I buy a 3-bedroom unit. I put in 3 golf pros that are making $150,000 each. And it's a seasonal, they're here May 1st to October 31st, but I do need a place to house them. And it's a lot more cost effective for me to spend $850,000 on a 3-bedroom unit than it is for me to go out and buy a 3-bedroom house for, $1.5 million. Right?
Is that a benefit in kind though? Right?
That's how, the kind of.
Yeah, I guess it's just the taxable issues. Are we kind of, supporting a benefit in kind that people are potentially not taxed on? Because the fair market value of those properties from a rent perspective is going to be far higher than what was being charged here. So if you're already above that income threshold and you're being given this rent controlled apartment by the company you work for, even though you're being paid adequately well, if that's taken away from affordable housing, that could potentially be problematic.
I don't think it's taken away from affordable housing, though. I think, and Eric creating a separate overlay, I think addressed that, because you wouldn't put this designation on an art or affordable development, because that exists and is serving its purpose. So I don't think it's competing with affordable housing. I think the idea here is trying to bring private money in, because so many affordable projects are limited by funding, and that limits income often to 60 or 80%. And at 60 or 80% AMI, you can pretty quickly earn your way out of a place to live. And this would prevent that. Whereas home ownership, for example, it's limited when you get in there, but you can then thrive and have your house forever. This allows for that type of growth, I think. And frankly, I don't know if the golf pro job was one of concern, or to me, that would be a appropriate use.
I'd love to be a golf pro.
You know what I mean?
and what did I do wrong here?
And frankly, the businesses who are investing in this, or the people who invest, are paying more knowing they can't charge very much rent. So either they really need to find places to have their employees live, or it's just a bad choice. There's a limit, there are protections here so that the system can't be gamed. It might not be perfect, but
who's benefiting from the increased density? The developer, right? It's not the individual businesses. If we left it at 8 units an acre, they could do all of these things and still be fine. They would buy an individual unit. It's who I'm trying to figure out.
On that, I think it's the economy of scale.
It's economics.
The economics is that there's the purchase price of the property and the price of the development. The larger amount of units, then too, the more amount of units, this should decrease the valuation of the overall unit price. be taken on a per unit.
Go ahead.
So
I
that's
was just
why.
going to ask, are there any properties out there right now that have the multiple resident zoning that are vacant?
There is one, but it is only a little sliver of land, so the real answer is no.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ian, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, Eric, do you want to finish your presentation?
Yeah,
or
sure.
and then
I
I'll-
only have a couple more slides here, so.
That's good. It's creating a lot of, dialogue.
Another legal restriction would, or a set of them would be, as I grouped them here, related to future affordability. So, in particular, proposed in here is a cap on the resale price of the units. Again, like I say, I really want to give you a breakdown of what this would mean essentially, of different prices in, year 1, year 2, year 3. But included in here is an idea, and this mirrors what we do in some of our ground lease agreements in our home ownership program, but is basically have a cap on the appreciation of value by limiting the resale price in conjunction with the CPI, plus 2%. So basically, each year it increases what you could resell the unit for, but not as such, not at a rate in keeping with the open market real estate prices out here. So the idea would be that down the road, that restriction would have these units essentially be affordable in comparison to future real estate prices. The other is, and I touched on it, is the option of selling or renting directly to a moderate income family. That basically gives, an alternative if, let's say, there isn't a business, one of these units is looking to be sold and there isn't a business that's interested, you could also just directly sell or rent to a moderate income family. The other kind of future affordability restrictions here, and I kind of already covered it, but is going with condos instead of cooperatives, so that in case there is something that the community housing fund could be used for, like a first-time home buyer loan, if a unit in the future meets that definition, that it would be eligible for it. Then I guess the main enforcement arm here, or enforcement process would be that the condominium board or the individual unit owner, but basically every unit individually, would need to obtain a permit from the town, again, likely my department, whenever they are, changing ownership, changing tenancy, or at the very minimum on a yearly basis. I do need to talk with ordinance enforcement in the town attorney's office about that, but Ian said this already, which is that that process of, basically setting up a unit and it has restrictions over it as far as tenants and ownership, and having them come in for an annual permit, that mirrors what we do for commercial. In particular, it's very close to what we do for commercial apartments, or apartments over stores, but it's also similar to ADUs. They have to come in on an annual basis, tell us who's living in there, what they're, a copy of the lease, what they're charging in rent, and check that, in certain cases that the tenant meets income requirements, not the residential ones, but the commercial ones have that restriction. And then again, just to make the point that I don't envision this as something that the town runs in any sense or form. It would be a condominium complex like any other that has a condominium board. Obviously, there are issues with those that are unique to that kind of setup, but we wouldn't be looking to run this. We would just be looking to check and verify that the owners and the tenants meet the programmatic elements. So, other than that, this is basically kind of mirroring the process moving forward for affordable housing development code changes, but you've already had a very good discussion that's touched on a lot of elements. Should have a discussion about it, and determine what things you might want to see changed, or basically give town staff some direction as to where to go from it. And then again, just a reminder that this would be a code amendment. It would need to go to the planning board. I have not sent this specifically to the planning department yet for their comments. You're going to want them on this, specifically as as this is a new use in the town code. And then again, we haven't done an environmental review for this, but we will, and also hold a public hearing on it, when that time comes, so.
Just one quick follow-up question for you, Eric, on this is that if we were to create this new zoning code, could it also come with its own tax rate potentially, just due to the intensification of use for a for-profit business on town land? Would that then give the town some justification to have a different tax rate on these properties?
I mean, I don't know. That would probably be, the tax assessor's office, so it could probably give you more information. There's nothing to me that at face value says that you couldn't.
But I do think that, inherently we would be building the tax base because there's no, I would have to talk to the assessors. I have not, but I don't think they're getting any kind of a break for being affordable because it's not technically that. So I think that if somebody were to build one of these, it's growing our tax base. I don't think they're getting off. I think we want to be careful by overtaxing it because if we create this, the idea is to incentivize people doing it. And frankly, I don't know that it would happen. Are you done presenting? You're finished?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I think really the whole idea here is to get private money involved to help address what I think we all recognize as an issue. I think there's been really good conversation here, and I think there's real questions. This is a new idea worth, deep discussion. I hope to bring this back, one more time, but I think it's worth sort of fleshing these ideas out and hopefully, soliciting some feedback from the public as well. But this mirrors almost identically what an affordable housing development would be. The only exception is income, really. Because we all know, most affordable projects have a hard time getting off the ground because of funding. And so the two things that don't exist that are in affordable housing are income restrictions on the tenant. Because, if you're restricted to 60% AMI or 80% AMI, most people here who live and work here wouldn't qualify. So we wanted to remove that. The other restriction that's being removed is the sale price, because I think just the economics say that you can't build units for what you can sell them for and not lose money. So if we want to incentivize people to do this, the idea is that it would be a risk for a developer or a business to do this. And the only reason they would want to is because they need to house somebody who's valuable to them otherwise in a working role. So
I agree with everything on that. I guess, and this is from the very get-go when I had first meetings with representatives kind of behind these initiatives, it's just what businesses. That's the piece that still kind of gets me slightly. Like, look, there's some businesses I think as a town we need to really prioritize, in terms of them being essential employees to the town and how we function, versus others. And this doesn't have any mechanism for delineating that. I will acknowledge that, some of the organizers have said that they'll have their own internal mechanism for doing so, and I appreciate that. But it's just that's a piece where it's kind of like, the benefit to the town, yes, I think having employees, but it could also be abuse. It's like, how do we ensure that benefit to the town residents as a whole?
And it's probably, if I may add, my concerns are potential abuses. There are other differences. It's not just those differences, and I might disagree with that. In order to, the way that we allot affordable housing is through a lottery. It's a, can a relative of the business owner get one of these? How do you choose the employers? The restrictions seem to be you just have to be an employee or not even at some point. So there are guardrails in place that keep our affordable stock affordable, and the way that they're given out quite fair, and it's based on an income. There's also the income requirement. So there are specific differences. I understand that it would be great to have private money, develop this. The concept, I think, is really good. I'm still concerned about guardrails.
Yeah, the only thing about a lottery, that's true of, I think East Hampton Housing Authority projects, but it's not true of all affordable units. For example, an ADU. People.
But that's on private property.
Then this would be too.
So I don't think we're allowing one. It's still a certain density. Part of this is to allow more density to make it more palatable, and to allow that density, which will have impacts. I just feel like the guardrails would be the affordable housing guardrails for me work for why we're increasing density on a property. I don't know if I see these set working for that.
Right, because the affordable housing out here has a track record, right? We've seen the projects that East Hampton Housing Authority's put forward and Windmill Village has put forward. This is something that's brand new concept, and we're giving them plus 50% more than what you would ordinarily get if you fell under the multiple residence.
No, I understand, but just factually, not all affordable, like technically affordable properties or units go through a lottery. There are ones currently in commercial.
I agree with that, but we only allow the increase in density on the ADU units on the private properties because they fall under all these requirements of an ADU. So we're not doing that here. Some of those requirements where we allowed density increase in the past are not proposed here. So that's my concern again is guardrails and abuses.
Yeah, I think that is the real concern. I think we're trying to develop guardrails and restrictions that they're not going to be the same as ADUs, but would solve the same kinds of problems, making sure we're the right people here. I mean, look, the idea here is to have, we all know people who have lived and worked here and have moved away because they can't find a place to live. The idea here is for employees, and this is not perfect code, there should be changes, but employees who literally can't find a place to live to have some more opportunities. The density, I understand if we're looking at it like, why would we give them more? And frankly, that's why I wanted to make sure we had the affordable housing density also at 12 in the same meeting, because would never offer this to, private developer and not to our traditional affordable units. That wouldn't be fair or make sense. But truthfully, we're already asking somebody to pay more for a property that then they're going to be able to charge for rent to make that money back. And so that's a real risk. And I think we've effectively removed most of the speculation here. People can't buy these to profit greatly. In fact, I think it would take a while. And the restriction on the price increase from where we are, if we look at affordable housing 20 years ago, it seemed bad then, and it's so much worse right now. So I don't think land prices are going down. So even if this original sale price is a little bit high, if we restrict the way that it can grow, I do think we're investing in the future of housing in town. I agree with everybody about guardrails, and I think it's really helpful to hear concerns because I share them. To Tom's point, we just can't legally restrict how somebody earns their income. We talked to the attorney's office about this, but we can restrict it to people, businesses here or employees here. And to me, whether it's just the right kind of business or not, I think this is worth a shot. And again, I think we could refine it a little bit. I do have a question about the 1 year lease term because we live in a somewhat seasonal community for sure. I think we would have to allow at least 2 tenants, no term shorter than 3 months or something like that, or 6 months or whatever it is. But I think we should allow for what we all know is a situation where some people live here seasonally and then don't. Maybe they're going to be vacant for part of that. But I think we'd allow for that. And the sole residence, I think it's tricky when we talk about the hospital maybe using it. And I also think Kate has brought up a couple times the idea of just a resident using it. I'm not sure if that's good or not. I think you might need to have a job. But I will say that anecdotally, I've heard from the public a little bit concerned about, so businesses now are going to own the housing for the employees. And that sounds like, given America's history, company store and company housing.
Concerning.
It is, except for nobody's going to do this kind of development. It can't happen with traditional affordable housing because of funding sources.
No, I agree.
It just doesn't. So what we're trying to do is, try something new, frankly. And I don't know that it will work. And if it doesn't and we pass it, we wouldn't have done any harm because nobody does it. And I think that another thing that Eric has done here, which I had questions about, honestly, was a new overlay district. But instead of having this qualify or be possible in all affordable housing overlay district, we don't want it to compete with, we wouldn't want somebody to go and try to do it where there's already an affordable housing and change it into this. So we could very selectively put it on lots. Now, I happen to think that any place this overlay district would probably also be an affordable housing because we wouldn't want to give an advantage here. The developments really mirror each other in terms of scale and restrictions. The only two things are the original sale price and the income, because we're trying to fill this huge hole between what is low income and what is still unaffordable in East Hampton. And that's, this might not be perfect, but that's the attempt here. And I hope we can refine this and get some public comment and eventually get it to hearing to see if there's any meat on the bone.
Yeah, no, listen, I totally get that. And it's been an issue throughout history, right? Cadbury's chocolate, he was one of the first guys to actually develop the employee worker town. And it was considered, luxurious living relatively at the time. I think if these projects are done right and they protect the workers correctly, they can be great. But I think, we've all said it. How do we avoid it being abused?
And when we bring this back, I would like that chart you had on page 5 where you were comparing affordable housing to employee housing development. I'd like to see the third column, because multiple residence development, I mean, aside from us, zoning other properties, multiple residents, there's nothing stopping from employer-sponsored or employee housing right now. They could do it at 8 units per acre, and they would have to have a minimum of 4 acres.
And I just, this is probably, for me, just to do my own personal research, I need to understand how that compensation works. And what happens if you would still have the lease, if the lease is going to be at least 3 months or a year, or if you're let go from that company, what happens to your tenancy? And you got kids in the school district, if you have a more than one bedroom, if you have children, what happens if you either leave the job on your own account or you are fired from the job? How does that compensation thing work?
It would follow fair housing rules. We would mirror, so if those regulations change, it would change with it. But right now it would be 90 days. You can't lose your job and lose your housing.
So could you include that so we're aware of that?
Other thoughts, comments?
I mean, that's something I might want to consider if the people have children. Say it's a 2-bedroom apartment, you've got kids, do you let the kid finish out the academic year at least, versus the 90-day window? I mean, just you try and make that as kind as, so it's.
Yeah, no, I understand the protection. I think ironically, I think the protections we want to offer can be at odds with abuse, because you don't want somebody to get in there and then not leave if they no longer qualify. But obviously you don't want, look, it's not ideal to have somebody's job tied to their housing, but it's our reality in town already. That's real. And unfortunately, I just don't think there's a lot of viable alternatives. If people own businesses here, they know. You just can't find people to work, and this might be a way to get there. So I think we have to have protections. At the same time, if you are overly protecting, you can't get people, can't assure the intended use. That could be looked at as abuse too. Somebody gets a job for a day and then has a summer home, or whatever.
So I also would want to contemplate then what is the impact of these privately owned developments at, bought at market value versus the potential affordable housing overlay where we guarantee the affordability. Would this be more competition to trying to locate those properties? Because this is more attractive because it's profitable.
It's not profitable, though. I think we've built it such that it is dangerously not profitable, which might be a hurdle to development.
More information about that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think a walk through the financials of that aspect, I think would be really helpful to the public as a whole, just to kind of show, look, this isn't a money-making scheme. This is the economics of how to make this kind of happen.
Or it can't become a money-making.
The way it's proposed right now is we're not controlling the initial price. Some developers are going to have to figure out how to do it, or some business, how to do it, and either sell them or rent them for their own purposes. So there's no restriction there. However, there's a restriction on how much that price can escalate. And knowing how real estate works, real estate's probably going to go like this, and this would go like this. So it becomes more and more affordable every year it exists, assuming, similar trends. The other so there's a restriction on that escalation, and there's a restriction on what rent you can charge, which to me Those two factors effectively remove all speculation aside from the initial build out. But frankly, we're not beating people back. We're trying to build units for employees right now. And so, I think there's some benefit to letting the market work itself out there. And if they can't build it affordably where somebody's going to buy it, knowing what rent they can charge, then the thing never happens. And if they do build it, there's some speculation at first time, but it's totally limited by how it can increase.
I think for me, I understand all that, but the idea that there's not an income requirement, an income cap, is, I don't know how much the cap on the rent is effective in that, because you could be making $500,000 a year and get one of these.
Yeah, I mean, the folks that I know that have employer-sponsored housing that, they don't pay rent. Again, it's just part of their compensation. They've been attracted to work here, and the housing comes.
And that could be within here. What we wanted to do is have a ceiling on it, though, so that nobody could try to profit.
And obviously, also with a condo, you have to have like a capital reserve, right? There's got to be money going in. So, when the roof leaks or, the
maintenance,
the sewage treatment has to be maintained. There's, funding in there.
Yeah.
So there's common charges of some type that have to be paid too.
And in the legality of the traditional condominium model, you can be, I believe, assessed so many times a year, a certain amount of money. I don't know how that gets.
And the income restrictions are a really good point, Kate. I mean, we talked about trying to include that, and that's actually why everything in here allows for a traditional affordable family to live there. So like that is always a fallback. The reason why it's not written in the code is because what we're trying to intentionally do is reach the people who don't qualify for affordable housing, but still can't afford to live here, which is a lot of people. And especially if you're talking about police or doctors, and we can't guarantee that's the only people who live there, but they would be precluded from this in all likelihood if we had the restriction.
If it's police, though, then the town would have to buy condos to be the employer?
No, the individual employee could do it.
Oh. The individual employee can
Yep.
purchase.
And their investment only increases 2% each year.
I mean, you guys are all
I'm just thinking out loud, just trying to.
No, you're peeling back some really good questions.
This is new ground.
Yeah. No, I think it's all really good questions. And honestly, that's why I wanted to bring this to the board again, because I don't think it's fully figured out. But I think these are all concerns Eric and I have talked about. We had a meeting with Rob and the attorneys. And again, my goal would be to bring this back in October, in another month, hopefully with more opinions. If we decide it's not something we want to proceed with, we could stop. But I think it's worth trying to hone in a little bit further. And also, I would really like to get it to public hearing, whether it goes forward or not. I know that, may be a personal risk for me as the guy who's sort of bringing this forward, but it's a worthy discussion. It's an issue our town has. Maybe this can help solve an issue. Maybe it can't, but it's certainly worth discussion.
Yeah, and I think conceptually, I support it. It's just the details.
Yep.
Right. And once again, you could be doing this at 8 units per acre.
Yeah.
If you had if the zoning was.
And to the point about
property.
multiple residents, Eric and I have talked a lot about housing issues, and that has come up. Frankly, we already had 2 things on the agenda for today. Hopefully, maybe next time we could talk about this again and then include a conversation about multiple residents, which there's code that can be changed there as well to, I think, the benefit of everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you,
You always spur a lot of conversation when you come to our work session.
Yeah, Eric.
A lot of information, a lot of work went into that. Thank you.
I get paid by the word, right?
Yeah, I think you,
By the minute.
you do. You write long memos.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and board
Thoughtful
members,
memos, but long memos.
board members, public, feel free to reach out to my office. Even if you think this is a terrible idea, please tell me. I want to hear it.
All right, so now we are up to liaison reports.
Right, yes, thank you. IT, we had a meeting for OpenGov myself and Councilmember Rogers had a meeting with IT and planning regarding OpenGov and its rollout. Just to update my fellow board members, the likelihood is we initially kind of hoped to have a November soft rollout. That's currently really looking more like the new year at this point, just due to resources and personnel. Arts Council, I just want to have a reminder for the public that on the 26th, there is the Why Copyright Registration Matters presentation at LTV. That's 725 Industrial Road. That's 6 to 8 p.m. Anti-bias task force, with supervisor's permission, we would like to do a work session at some point in November to do a presentation of recommendations for the board. ADU committee, which we'd like to do a work session around the 15th of October if possible. And I'll circle back and confirm that with Eric. Disability advisory meeting, we have one on the 19th via Zoom. Emergency preparedness committee, we will have our next meeting on the fourth Thursday of the month, which is the 26th. That will be at 11 a.m. The business committee will be meeting on the 18th at 2 p.m. And just lastly, special events. I just want to call out one event that's taking place this weekend on September 22nd. This is Greg Stock. This is for Greg Donahue, who's a local resident who's done a huge amount for the community out there. So I just encourage all residents of the town to make that if they can. That's the Lighthouse on the 22nd from 4:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m.
Great. Thank you, Tom. David?
Last week, the Montauk CAC met. We had a discussion on community housing. Eric Chance came and gave a nice presentation, answered a lot of questions, and stirred a lot of debate as he just witnessed just now. Some of the conversation did come back down to seasonal housing and some of the same parallels that we just did now. In Montauk, yes, New York State DOT is still moving forward with their Montauk drainage project that's happening in the area of South Elder to South Embassy. Again, it's a drainage project to try to increase water quality by taking a lot of the road runoff out of Fort Pond. East Hampton Town Lifeguards. The season has closed for our town lifeguards at our bay and ocean beaches. I want to thank the town lifeguards and specifically Chief John Ryan Jr. for a wonderful season. Garden beaches are now closed to swimming, but they're open to anyone that wants to enjoy the lovely fall and autumn seasons upcoming for beach walking and such then too. I'll come back to the town board after we have end of season report for another agenda item upcoming. Montauk Playhouse, we're moving forward with the security plan for the Playhouse, incorporating all the different entities that are actually at the Playhouse, working with our safety officer, Ed Michaels, and others on this then too. We're also continuing to move forward with the construction meeting. We have a bi-weekly construction meeting tomorrow. Second House Road and Industrial Road in Montauk. This is a part of a intersection that was a project from the PSE&G in Keyspan. We now do have a new conceptual design that's being evaluated to incorporate stop signs. We did do a public meeting about this, about a potential roundabout at this location, but in conversation with multiple property owners and others, we decided that design might not work for the intended users in that area with larger vehicles and such. So we're going to a different design. I'll bring that to the town board shortly. As far as Army Corps of Engineers overpasses in Montauk, we're expecting more information on the final plans for the current wooden crossovers by November, based on my last contact with the Army Corps on this. Looking for a winter action, either for removal or a different design on there, so I'll have more information on that shortly. As far as the Recreation Department,
Just say, we haven't gotten the O&M yet. for that project, have we?
we have not, and I've been requesting it then too. So they still need to get the final as-built from the contracting company, and that would be reviewed by DEC and also from Army Corps. So yes, we have not received those. I've been pressing on that also. Recreation Department, the turkey trot signups. Ian, you can sign up anytime you want. You're out there all day long if you want. Go watch the Penn State, Michigan State football game after or something like that if you want. And run and hide, buddy. Backstory there. Anyway, so the turkey trot is up. You can please sign up for that. John Rooney says we actually have an entirely full soccer program, but there is one or two spots still limited for our tennis program. It just shows the need and desire of parents and children to play and recreate. Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee has met recently, and they started to review the RFA 2 2024 applications. We'll bring that to the board probably about the next month and a half. I'll let the supervisor know when we want to put that on. Lastly, about the Nature Preserve Committee, we had a work session agenda item about the former field property and the management plan there. I think, Tom, you mentioned that to the Amagansett CAC. I wanted to see if the board wanted to make any changes to that or if we can move that forward to a public hearing. So if you can maybe just email me that, any concerns on their changes, because we do have a timeliness on that within the town code that we have to move that forward on there then too. So if you let me know, maybe by the end of the week, and we can potentially schedule that for October if we feel ready to move forward on that. And that's all I have, Supervisor.
Great. Thanks, David. Kate?
Yes, thank you. We had our next meeting on the Ditch Plains Dune project will be this coming Wednesday with the coastal consultants.
Thursday.
I'm sorry, Thursday. Thank you, David. And then we'll be going out to the neighborhood with having large maps done of the profile of the dune and what the visuals would look like at that. And I'd like to go out to the immediate neighborhood and the community as a whole. And once we have plans in place, then we'll do a presentation to the town board.
So it's not October 1st that the consultants are going to present?
Well, I would keep that on the agenda.
And you could forward to all of us what you've got so far so we can see?
But once we finalize what we have, which we plan to do this Thursday.
Great.
Also, I had an initial on the Montauk Business District, New York Department of State grant that we received. I had an initial meeting with Sam Klein and Leo Dawn from the Chamber and Andy Harris from CCOM regarding the project description, initial framing, and a steering committee to do even before we get going with the grant. Right now, the process is the state has sent us draft of the grant and the tasks required, and so it's the action contract, and we're making comments and changes to that, and gonna be sending that back to the state for their review. So that's where we are in that process. This will be a multi-year process to come up with this plan for a resilient future for the Montauk Business District. And I call it that. It's not just the area that's known as downtown Montauk. It goes out to the Benson Reserve, to the west, up to Industrial Road, even a little bit higher, to the north, and then the neighborhood east of what's traditionally known as the downtown Montauk District. And that will focus on building codes and zoning codes that will increase resiliency to the impacts of the climate crisis, such as we'll be looking at stormwater management for that area with the increase of downpours and increase of storms, the increase of volume of downpours and what that stormwater impact it has in that area, and how to increase resiliency, sea level rise, and erosion primarily. We'll also be taking a look at the impacts to the infrastructure. We'll be evaluating the existing zoning and building codes and see where part of the process is just look at where they're lacking in promoting those three particular elements. In the future, once we get this sorted out, that will be also brought to the town board for presentation. And then it includes a lengthy and detailed public engagement process, which I'm very happy to see written into the grant. So this will be a real community effort to come up with changes to those particular codes. Let's see. The Energy and Sustainability Committee met yesterday, and I gave them a report on some of the accomplishments, recent accomplishments that the town has received, our bronze recertification in climate smart community. We talked about now going for the silver, and we'll be coming up. The Energy and Sustainability Committee has asked for a list of projects that would move us to silver, and so we can prioritize some of those projects. The bronze recertification was an updating document on our sustainability processes, policies, and our ongoing commitment to climate-related actions, projects, and CARP, and the engagement all around it. One of the most important sources of the new additional points since our 2021 certification was the composting work and the pilot project that earned us quite a lot of additional points. As you know, the Clean Energies Communities, the town received that $100,000 grant for completion of the LED streetlight project, solar install on parks, and ongoing purchases of EVs. We've been discussing how that will work. It looks like we will be using that on an electric vehicle, perhaps a charging station at Westlake Drive, Comfort Station, and municipal electric landscaping equipment. And we also applied last week to a DEC zero emission vehicles rebate program to request rebates on some of our electric vehicles that were purchased in the last 2 years. We can expect around $25,000 in rebates on those. And that's what I have.
Great, thanks, Kate. Ian?
Yes, there's a spring CAC meeting on Monday at 6 p.m. at Ashwag Hall. One of the topics we're going to talk about there will be the focus of my liaison report, which is this potential New York Forward grant that I mentioned in my last liaison report. This opportunity came up fairly quickly, and as the deadline is fast approaching, the application is due by October 18th. Samantha Klein pointed out this grant, and I think there's some great potential to do it in Springs. Chelsea, thank you for pulling up that map. If you look at the screen, that's the map of the focus area. The grant is meant to revitalize sort of downtown or central areas, and to me, this is the area of the heart of Springs, that corner of Ashwag Hall, the Parsons Blacksmith Shop, the library is encompassed there, as well as a general store and the school. And then the area goes all the way to Fort Pond, from Springs Fireplace to 3 Mile Harbor. I chose that area partially because of what the grant is calling for. They're asking for things that, enhance public spaces. One of the potential projects refers to elevating specific cultural historical qualities that enhance the feeling of small town charm. To me, that is the heart of Springs. If you go stand there at Pussy's Pond and look at those buildings, it's just really, really beautiful. And so the grant is super interesting in that it can be used for sort of historic restorations, perhaps, road safety or pedestrian safety, and then business enhancement. So businesses could participate in this grant for a 25% match. The town has no match should we win the grant. And so it's a great opportunity. It's still very much a long shot, but I'm aggressively seeking community engagement. I plan on submitting a resolution for Thursday to form a committee. With town staff, as well as people in the Springs community who I know are involved, either as business owners or just concerned citizens. It'll be the focus of our spring CAC meeting to that group on Monday. And then I'm hoping to have a work session where Sam can present more details in early October. We're also going to do a survey that'll be available on the town website. I'm going to go sort of door to door with businesses that might want to participate, and just anybody who lives in Springs or in this area and has any thoughts, let me know. We're very lucky to have the Hamlet studies in hand, and the Hamlet study did refer to these sort of 2 neighborhood business zones at the end of Fort Pond. And I think the community at that time really didn't want to make this, an overly developed. And so there's this balance of trying to sort of enhance business opportunities and opportunities for residents there without changing the character too much. And that'll be a difficult balance. The grant also deals with environmental qualities, and we are currently going through replacement of the Springs Library septic system. I believe Pollock Krasner House is doing the same thing, the general store. And so we're in a good position as a town, I think, in that people have already shown a willingness to really to do work in this area for environmental purposes, historic purposes, and to improve businesses. So again, it's still a long shot. I really do want feedback, but my drive right now is to work on this fast so that if it is something we want to pursue, that we have a chance of getting it. $4.5 million could be super impactful. And again, it's not one project. It'd be spread out for historic, business, environmental reasons. So reach out to me or Sam Klein, and stay tuned to the town website. I'll talk to Patrick, our information officer, as well, to do some releases as more things develop. But again, welcome feedback, and I'm very excited about the potential.
Yeah, I will say, because when you said one of the areas was road safety, and when I served on the spring school board, we were concerned about kids, you we bus more than a mile away from the school. So there are kids that live on Fort Pond Boulevard and live further up Springs Fireplace Road that are walking or riding their bikes. And I know parents are really concerned because there's no sidewalk. We did the Safe Routes to School at my last year on the board. It only took like 8-9 years to get the project constructed. But I know that there's, concern about pedestrian safety, bike safety along Fort Pond Boulevard and Springs Fireplace Road in that corridor.
Yeah, that's actually how this originally came up, as I was commenting on that, in Springs generally, and Sam said, wait a minute, there might be a grant that didn't sort of fit the rural roads that I had talked about, but this area, I think it does. So I think that sidewalks or road safety are something to talk about. I know that also can be controversial. So I think it's something to explore as part of this grant, but I don't think it's essential. But as you point out, Gardner Ave to the school, there are sidewalks the whole way. The other major residential corridor of Fort Pond doesn't have that. And particularly that section from sort of Ashwag Hall to Springs Pizza or liquor store is very, very, it's short, but pretty dangerous. And so I think that there's ways that we could sort of, again, address that issue while still preserving the community character and charm. And we'll see where it goes, but I'm very excited and I hope to have a lot of participation.
Well, thanks for taking that on, Ian.
Thank you.
Is that it?
And that's it. And, and thanks to Sam Klein. Sam really deserves a lot of credit for even having the possibility here.
So I just wanted to share some East Hampton Town Police Department statistics for last weekend. This is between 2 p.m. on Friday and 6 a.m. Monday morning. The East Hampton PD handled 155 events, including 13 residential noise complaints, 6 commercial noise complaints with 1 summons issued. There were 2 motor vehicle accidents, 16 medical aided cases, and 22 traffic citations, and 10 town ordinance citations issued. It was a busy weekend for special events, including the Virgin Del Cisne Walk from Abraham's Path Ball Field to St. Therese Church on Friday night. They do that in the overnight. And that walk had roughly 1,000 participants and occurred without incident. A PD also handled the In God's Love We Deliver bicycle ride on Saturday, which had 750 bicyclists participating. And that also concluded without incident. So that was really great to hear. Friday night, there was a special SLA enforcement detail that went out, which resulted in one arrest at 3 different establishments. All the defendants were charged with selling alcohol to a minor. The last couple of weeks have been intense on our side of the hall, working on the 2025 budget. By state law, we have to have the budget posted by September 30th. We're hoping to have it done by Friday, the 27th. Right now, I'm meeting with all of the department heads to review their personnel requests. And then lastly, our office is in the process of drafting a letter to the MTA requesting the support of upgrades and improvements to the Spionk to Montauk Railroad line, because they'll be voting on their 2025 to 2029 capital budget. The latest I heard is the vote could be as early as September 25th. And I'm asking board members to sign on to that letter. We have a task force that meets every other week, and all of the towns and are sending letters, as are the school superintendents put a letter out. We need the Long Island Railroad MTA to invest in our community. So folks have access to employment, and it creates economic growth and really takes the stress out of a lot of our staff's daily commute, which can be up to 2 hours each way. So Patrick's working on that letter, and we'll circulate it, and hopefully you'll all sign on. So that's what I have for today. So we have a couple of resolutions, if we could start there.
Certainly. First resolution I have is 2024-1171. This is a contract to amend resolution 2024-940, authorizing agreement with Esri ArcGIS Desktop Standard. This is a change to fix the budget account number. The correct budget account number is B168054623.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Happy to offer Resolution 2024-1172. This is authorize the CPF acquisition and amend the 2024 Management and Stewardship Plan. The reporter owner is Spencer Shea. The location is 91 Northwest Landing Road, East Hampton, tax map 300-90-3-23.1. It's approximately 0.43 acres of land. We had the public hearing most recently, and the purported purchase price is not to exceed $1,230,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
1173 is to authorize the CPF acquisition and amend the 2024 Management and Stewardship Plan. This is for the purported owner of the estate of Mary Eggers at 21 South Federal Street, Montauk, tax map 300-28-7-13. The purchase price is not to exceed $325,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
1174 is accept donation of tree work services from Martyrs to at 803 Fireplace Road. The services are valued at $12,150.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I have Resolution 1175. This is to waive fee for a building permit for building permit numbers 76457, whereas a request has been made to waive the fee associated with building permit mentioned above in the amount of $500. The Chief Building Inspector, Joseph Palermo, has requested that the fee be waived. Resolved that the town hereby waives the fee associated with the aforementioned building permit.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 1176 is to accept security and undertaking an urban renewal parcel 8 in SP-3, and this is pursuant to New York State urban renewal laws. The town board has adopted urban renewal plans governing the development of the old file map areas within the town, and resolve that the undertaking together with the following security are hereby accepted by the town. The applicant is 9 Front Street LLC, care of Elizabeth Gleason, 636 Hands Creek Road, East Hampton, New York. It's the map number is your urban renewal map 8 in SP-3, map number 473, block number 2, lots 10 through 17, Suffolk County tax map number 300-121-2.00-001.1, and this is in the amount of $18,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Lastly, I have Resolution 1177, and this is to amend Resolution 2024-1144, and this was an error in the funding line, this resolution is to amend it to the proper funding line to reflect the appropriate funding line with no change in the budget. The amount was for $2,141.48.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So do I have a motion to go into exec session?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session for CPF, advice of counsel, leases, and personnel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone. And Jason, thank you for your assistance today.
Thank you.
And thanks to our audience. It's big.